third day of the exam. As soon as the morning of the third day came, Luthen released the Grasswhisker. The small creature darted into the forest with light and nimble steps, weaving between the trees at a steady pace. Luthen followed without much delay, his movements steady as he kept his eyes locked on it, trailing like a shadow and never allowing it to slip out of sight. Who would have thought that I would become fast enough to follow a Grasswhisker? The thought drew a smirk across his face, though he was well aware that he was only joking with himself. Even he knew it was only because the little cat-like monster was injured that he could keep up with such ease. It had already been around 2 hours since they began, and during that time, the creature had not stopped even once. Luthen was forced into a constant run, his body pushed forward without a single moment of rest. I always questioned the point of running for almost 5 hours every morning, and I even cursed the instructor for it countless times. But now I am glad I did. I should thank him after returning. Being from Section E, which held the largest number of students as well as the weakest ones in the academy, their instructors had been especially strict. The training they went through was far harsher than any other class. Since they lacked natural talent, it had to be compensated with discipline and relentless hard work. Because of that, their stamina and endurance had been shaped to withstand almost anything. Though, if I wanted, I would not have needed to go through all of this. The truth was, Luthen was not talentless at all. In fact, he carried a trait that stood at the very peak of rarity. Jack of all trades, utility. A mythical rank trait that allowed him to learn things much faster than others and excel in all sorts of areas, such as cooking, crafting, tracking, hunting, butchering, and countless other utility skills. His potential was also far higher than anyone realized. The only reason he had been placed into the lowest class was because of how poorly he ranked in the academy exam, something he had done deliberately. During the potential checking, he had used his family heirloom, a relic capable of temporarily disrupting any device, to tamper with the academy's potential testing machine. By lowering its efficiency, he made it appear as though his potential only reached the level of a grandmaster. He had done it intentionally, not wishing to draw attention. The reason was simple. His family was once a noble household, but it had fallen into ruin decades ago, back when his grandfather was still the head. The downfall of his family had been caused by that very heirloom. Someone had desired it desperately, and though the exact culprit remained a mystery even now, their greed had torn his family apart. After his parents' death, Luthen was left all alone. His mother had passed away during his birth, and his father eventually succumbed to a grievous wound he had received during the destruction of their family. Against his father's last wish, Luthen decided to enter the academy. His goal was clear, to grow stronger and one day find those who had destroyed his family. That was why he chose to hide his abilities and quietly wait for the right time to reveal them. When he first began trailing the Grasswhisker, which carried a tracker tied to its body, his inexperience was obvious. He was clumsy and careless, making far too much noise as he ran, and he lacked the proper skill for following and tracking prey. But as the hours passed, he began to adjust. His steps grew lighter, the sound of his movements faded, and his presence became carefully concealed among the trees. By the end of those 2 hours, he was already much better than when he had started, and the pursuit felt smoother, almost natural. Who says I don't have talent? I am talented enough to destroy anyone's confidence. But, talent aside, when will this monster stop? I am getting tired. Running 5 hours daily did not mean he could maintain his full strength for all that time. During training, he had the freedom to take breaks whenever he wanted, even slowing down when exhaustion caught up to him. Here, however, such luxury did not exist. There was no chance to rest, no moment to breathe freely, and even the thought of slowing down was dangerous, because slowing down meant losing the beast. Perhaps his luck finally shone, because the monster came to a halt. It climbed up a tall tree and vanished inside a hole hidden well beneath thick leaves and branches. Luthen, his body smeared with blood, dirt, and dust, stopped a short distance away. His chest heaved violently as he struggled to catch his breath. Huff! Huff! He let the sound slip through his throat, each breath scraping against his lungs as if fire had been set inside them. So, it was running towards its nest. Nice. Now I just have to hide and wait for someone from the opponent team to arrive. When his breathing finally calmed, he moved further away and began wiping away the bloodstains. Along the chase, he had encountered several smaller monsters, quickly cutting them down. But those clashes had left behind a trail of blood and broken branches. That trail was not a mistake. It was intentional, part of the plan. Leave behind enough traces to confuse the enemy, lure them deeper, make them restless. Even if they realized it was a trap, they could not ignore it because doing nothing meant risking expulsion. What a sadistic plan indeed. But is Miss Alicia not afraid of getting expelled? Luthen could not understand it, but from the way she spoke and carried herself, it seemed as if she was certain she would be safe no matter what happened to the rest of them. Anyway, I don't know where her confidence comes from, but I have to do my part. Squawk! A sharp cry tore through the sky, and Luthen lifted his gaze. Several seabirds were flying overhead, their wings cutting through the sunlight as they passed over the forest canopy. For a brief moment he followed their movements, then shifted his focus back. There was still work to be done, preparations to complete, and traces to clean. Meanwhile, back at the island shore, near a small mountain that rose at the end of the forest where the beach began, a hidden base had been prepared. At the top of that mountain, inside a crude but cleverly built shelter, 4 figures kept their watch. Each of them watched one direction, covering 3 possible paths from which the opponent team could approach, while the last member stayed outside, scanning the wide stretch of shoreline for any sign of invasion. They were Alicia and her group, of course. The base itself had been crafted by Varric, who used his earth-shaping ability to carve out a small room. Its walls looked natural, its narrow windows blended seamlessly with the mountain rock, making it seem like nothing more than a random formation to anyone passing by. The floor was softened with layers of leaves, and a small opening above allowed fresh air and sunlight to filter inside. Crude as it was, the base worked wonders, giving them safety and a place to rest without being seen. Yet what impressed everyone most was not the base, but something Luthen had done before leaving to follow the Grasswhisker. Using nothing but wood and seashells, he had shaped 3 small telescopes. With Corrin's water affinity, he froze and carved lenses from ice, clear enough to serve as glass. The process had been simple yet ingenious, and against all odds it worked. Though it drained Corrin's mana continuously to maintain ice, the amount of mana was so little that he could just recover it after using the breathing technique. That small invention gave them an unexpected advantage, allowing them to watch the distant landscape and keep track of anyone approaching long before they arrived. There are so many birds here, they are really blocking the view, Alina muttered while peeking in the direction Luthen had gone, seated closer to the middle of their group. We are at quite a decent height. It is natural for birds to crowd the skies here, so you should try to focus. Varric said strictly from her side, his tone leaving little room for complaint. Easy for you to say, but it is really hard. She shifted uncomfortably, narrowing one eye as she tried to look through with the other. You are just too soft. Were you not trained physically at all? Corrin asked with a trace of bewilderment, his eyes still fixed on the right side where the slope fell away. No, I mean, we have gone through many harsh trials, but right now it feels mentally exhausting, she admitted in a low voice. Her words made everyone fall silent, because it was true. The plan they were following looked simple and effective on the surface, yet carrying it out weighed heavily on the mind. Luthen was the first piece in that plan, serving both as bait and as their informer. If the opponent team moved toward his direction, he would shadow them carefully, then signal Alicia. Once they caught up with him, they would spring and ambush together. If the opponent team instead followed the traces and tracks Alicia and the others had left behind intentionally, then the battlefield would shift here. They would wait in silence and ambush them using the traps that Luthen had set beforehand. But there was always that lingering question that none of them wished to think too deeply about. What if the enemy failed to find either of them? What if time slipped away without a clash? In that case, they all would be expelled. It was a gamble. If it succeeded, it would feel like a blessing of fortune. If it failed, it would be nothing but misfortune in disguise. "Let us just hope everything goes according to plan," Corin muttered, his voice heavy with unease. The others silently agreed, but none spoke their thoughts aloud. The air was foul, an unbearable stench clinging to every corner of the surroundings. Poison drifted through the atmosphere, heavy and suffocating, turning the land into a place where nothing natural could survive. Among that choking fog, hidden behind a cluster of jagged rocks, someone stirred from their uneasy sleep. The figure shifted to the side, but the sudden jab of something sharp against his back made him wide awake. "I finally managed to fall asleep after putting in that much effort, and now this damned rock is forcing it all away like it means nothing." Ash sighed inwardly. Feeling the last traces of drowsiness leave him, he rubbed his eyes and slowly crawled out from the broken debris that had served as a makeshift shelter. Standing upright, he dusted his clothes with a few quick pats, pulled water from his space ring, and drank deeply before chewing down on a small portion of food. The simple routine steadied his body and mind, after which he began to move once again, heading deeper into the poisonous fog. For a while, the path remained strangely calm. No monsters attacked him, and that sudden realization made him pause. "Right? I have to turn off my absolute concealment." The moment he willed the skill away, countless monsters turned in unison, their twisted growls rumbling through the thick haze as they fixed their eyes on him. Ash cracked a faint smile, almost amused, and muttered quietly to himself, "Yeah, that's much better." Without hesitation, he lunged forward, meeting their charge with the same savage ferocity that burned in their bloodthirsty cries. It was already the third day since he had entered this place. Despite moving with full speed, never holding back, casting spells whenever the numbers grew overwhelming, and using his sword when they were fewer, he had only managed to reach the area where alpha monsters, the rank C beasts, roamed freely. In the time since, he had already slain nearly 400 savage monsters and around 100 alpha monsters. Most had fallen instantly in the crossfire of his destructive spells, while the remainder had unwillingly served as training dummies for his relentless sword. Now, as the ground trembled beneath the stampede of another 100 alpha monsters, their crazed eyes glowing with hunger and madness, Ash did not falter. He steadied his breathing, focused on his glabella, and with sheer willpower sent a signal to his anchor, to the soul tree within him. In that split second, without the slightest hesitation, he muttered softly, "Mini-spatial vortex." Unknown runic symbols bloomed to life around his hands, glowing faintly as they began to rotate in intricate patterns. At the same time, a vortex of spatial mana condensed between his palms, spinning violently until it resembled a miniature tornado, no larger than a man's head. Golden runes circled it in a bright halo, and with a swift motion, Ash hurled it straight into the oncoming horde of alpha monsters. It was a spell he had only recently developed, one that compressed and rotated spatial mana with terrifying intensity, warping the surrounding space. Anything drawn into it was shredded beyond recognition. But the cost was steep. Using even this small version drained nearly 1/4 of his mana core, and if he dared to conjure a larger one, he knew his entire core could be exhausted in a single attempt. The swirling vortex slammed into the first monster, and in an instant, blood exploded outward. The violent mana tore through its body as easily as bursting a balloon, and the spell surged forward without pause. The spinning mass carved a deep line across the ground, pulling in everything nearby with crushing suction. Monsters that tried to escape were dragged screaming into its pull, shredded to pulp in moments. By the time the vortex finally dissipated, only around 30 of the alpha monsters remained standing. The rest had been reduced to unrecognizable heaps of blood and flesh. The survivors froze, their snarls fading into trembling whimpers as fear spread among them. Their hunger was forgotten in the face of such overwhelming destruction, and one by one they turned away, fleeing desperately into the poisonous fog. "Not this time." Pointing Eclipse forward, he muttered, "Levitation." As soon as his spell finished, The sword lit up with runic symbols and rushed out of his hands, soaring into the air like a streak of light. It did not feel like a weapon leaving his grasp, but rather as if a part of his body had detached and taken flight. As if it were the extension of his will. He had already learned to spread his will outward, using it to sense the world around him, and to strengthen both his attacks and his control. Now, by combining that same will with space mana, he was able to let Eclipse fly with surprising ease, as if the sword was obeying the very flow of his thoughts. Just yesterday, after killing a large number of monsters, many had scattered and fled in fear, forcing him to waste most of his time chasing them down one by one. Even though his purpose here was to exterminate them all, he hated the idea of wasting time. As he remembered the frustration of that endless hunt, he decided not to repeat the same mistake. This spell had been born from that thought, inspired by the flying ability of the Godslayer's sword. Eclipse soared across the air, moving with a sharp and graceful rhythm. It pierced through monsters one after another, cutting them down effortlessly. It did not falter against distance, nor was it slowed by the restrictions of space. Instead, it moved as though it had slipped free from the very rules of logic itself. Within half a minute, every fleeing monster was slain, and the sword curved back, returning swiftly into Ash's hand. And just like that, Ash gained another 100 kills, the fastest harvest he had ever achieved. Of course, it was not automatic. Every motion of Eclipse was guided by his will, and that constant control consumed his mental energy bit by bit. But since he had only just woken from sleep, his mind was fully recovered, and the drain was easy to bear. It would be quite a good thing if there were a stat showing how much mental energy I have. Indeed, it would be convenient, yet such a thing did not exist. He had never seen it nor heard of it. Perhaps one day, if certain conditions were fulfilled, it might become possible, and then even his will stat would receive the blessing from the Rune of Balance. Wiping Eclipse clean, Ash pressed forward. As he advanced, after walking a few kilometers and slaying more monsters, he felt the surroundings grow darker once again. The mist returned, curling around him in thin veils, but now it was heavier than before. The purplish-green fog had deepened into a darker shade, one that seemed to sink into his skin and flare inside his body with a seething heat. When will my skill evolve? At least then I will finally be free from this burning sensation. But there was still time before that. Moving further into the deeper region, Ash realized he was very close to the center now. The entire environment around him had changed, as though he had stepped into a different dimension altogether. Previously, there had been traces of a military base being built here, with signs of tents, scattered construction materials, and the remains of machinery. But now none of those traces remained. The ground was pitch black, covered in strange growths that looked like coral pulled straight from the ocean floor, their shapes jagged and alien. The air was damp and heavy, carrying the faint smell of rot, and mushrooms of every kind crowded the land. Some were small and clustered together, others grew tall like trees, and a few were enormous, their caps glowing faintly in different colors, spreading a dim light through the gloom. The sight was eerie, unsettling, and strangely beautiful at the same time. Looks like I will be facing apex monsters soon. Ash was looking forward to it. After all, his stats were already around the beginning of the master rank, even though he was still at the beginning adept rank. That meant this would finally give him a real battle, one that could truly put him in danger. A fight where struggle was not a possibility but almost certainty. The thought of it stretched his lips into a crazed smile as he poured strength into his legs and increased his speed. He shot forward like a blur across the poisonous land, ignoring the burning sensation of toxins creeping into his body. His eyes gleamed when his sight caught his first prey. With mana enhancing his vision, the figure became clear, a monster of enormous size. The poisonous dogs he had faced earlier would seem like mere children beside it. Its body resembled that of a human, and its height reached as tall as a one-story house. Where a head should have been, there was instead a massive mushroom, its crown covered in countless tiny glowing blue orbs. The cap was a deep shade of red, vivid like fresh blood, while the rest of its body was bone white, with arms and legs shaped crudely like those of a person. Clusters of smaller mushrooms sprouted from its shoulders, and from its back hung long, pale vines that swayed faintly as if they possessed a will of their own. It looked less like a creature of flesh and more like some eerie fusion of plant and monster. The creature was moving somewhere else at first, but then its body halted. Slowly, it turned, and its head tilted ever so slightly toward Ash, as if it had felt the weight of his gaze. An intelligent monster? Ash's heartbeat quickened. He knew well the meaning behind that old saying, "If you gaze into the abyss will gaze back at you." The same was true for sentient monsters. They were rare, but their danger was beyond measure. Unlike mindless beasts that acted only on instinct, these could think, they could plan, and they could strike with cunning precision. Fighting a mindless monster was simple, but fighting one that carried true intelligence was not easy at all. In fact, it was one of the challenging things to do. And now, without realizing it, Ash had drawn the gaze of one such monster. But instead of growing scared, Ash grew happier. Finally, something that could prove as a challenge. With a crazed smile stretching across his face, Ash increased his speed until his surroundings blurred. The monster also turned fully towards him, its mushroom head tilting slightly as if measuring his intent, before it began walking forward in a slow and deliberate manner. Ash felt his heartbeat quicken, each thump echoing in his ears. A wave of excitement coursed through him, and he could feel his blood rushing to every corner of his body, making him feel even stronger. The surge of adrenaline brought with it a strange clarity, sharpening his focus to the smallest detail. As the distance closed, Ash tightened his muscles, gathering power into his legs, and leapt into the air in a clean, powerful arc, aiming straight for the monster's mushroom head. But the vines on the monster's back suddenly surged forth, their ends elongated, narrowing into sharp, needle-like points that whipped through the air, aiming to pierce Ash before he could reach his target. Phase. The word left Ash's lips like a chant, soft but clear. A single runic symbol appeared faintly upon his glabella, glowing for a heartbeat. His body flickered, and the vines passed straight through him, harmlessly phasing through his form. For an instant, he became untouchable, and as his body emerged again, still mid-air, the rune dimmed and vanished, the spell fading. The vines, failing to halt him, coiled back in frustration, and at the same moment, the monster raised its enormous hands, trying to crush him between its wide palms. Yet Ash's momentum was far too strong to be stopped. He had avoided using teleportation deliberately, not wanting to sacrifice the speed and force behind his movement. Instead, he chose a spell that devoured his mana at an alarming rate, almost draining one of his cores completely, just to ensure his strike would not lose power. Gliding past the sweeping hands and evading the lunging vines, Ash closed the gap. His body was wreathed in crackling lightning mana, and Eclipse, his sword, was cloaked in shimmering layers of space mana. With one clean motion, he slashed. The blade cut through space itself, and the strike cleaved into the mushroom monster's head, severing it from its body with terrifying ease. Thud! The massive body collapsed, shaking the ground as the headless form crumpled. Ash landed gracefully a short distance away, his fall controlled and silent, as if he had descended on invisible strings. But as he straightened, shock washed across his face. Am I really this strong? Or was the monster just too weak? Ash could not decide what to blame, but the way the beast had fallen so easily left him both surprised and unsettled. There was pride in the strike, yet the victory tasted hollow. He should have been satisfied, but instead he felt a pang of disappointment. Sigh! There goes my wish of getting experience. His shoulders slumped as he walked slowly toward the fallen monster, intending to retrieve its mana crystal. It had become a habit of his. Every beast he killed, he harvested the crystal and stored it within his soul vault. Those destroyed entirely by his spells left nothing behind, but any that remained intact were collected. Mana crystals were highly valuable. They sped up the process of mana absorption for awakened individuals, serving as a direct source of energy. Ash had tested them himself, once even purchasing a mana crystal from an S-rank beast, but the result had been disheartening. Only a tiny fraction of its mana had been absorbed by his body. His primordial core was a bottomless well, containing only the purest form of mana and expelling the impure one. Because of this, trying to fill it with normal mana crystals was nothing more than a delusion. There was one possibility, though. If he could acquire crystals from a mythical rank beast, then perhaps every 10 or so could raise one of his stats. But the problem was obvious. No one sold mythical rank mana crystals. To slay such a monster required an individual of the same level, and they would always absorb the crystal themselves to strengthen their own mana. Such treasures would never reach the market, making it nearly impossible for him to obtain them. And there was none present in the dragon treasury too. The dragons have their own way of growing stronger, different from the humans. He could, in time, grow strong enough to hunt such monsters himself. But the bitter truth was that he needed those crystals now, not in the distant future. His potential, after all, was capped at rank A, not rank SS. Still, he gathered crystals diligently. If not for his own growth, then at least as proof of his kills, and as gifts for Alicia, whom he knew would treasure them far more than he could. But as he neared the monster's dead body, his instincts suddenly flared. In that instant, Ash teleported into the air, appearing right above the creature's corpse. Below him, the once limp vines of the fallen monster shot out with blinding speed, striking the ground where he had been standing only a moment ago. At the same time, several other vines wrapped around the severed head and dragged it back toward the neck. What followed made Ash's eyes narrow. The detached head reattached itself, and in the blink of an eye, the wound healed completely, leaving not even a scar. Ash smiled, seeing that, his voice carrying a twisted excitement. Nice. It would be truly a shame if you died this easily. Verdict Ion. 200 replicas of Eclipse, forged entirely from life mana, surged forward like a storm of radiant blades. Yet just before they struck, countless eyes suddenly opened all over the creature's pale, fleshy body. Every blade froze mid-air, suspended as if locked in invisible chains. Ash's expression tightened. He instantly teleported away from that spot, reappearing several meters back, his eyes still locked on the monster. The monster, no longer slumped, but slowly rising, stepped out from the suspended sword's range. The blades were released a moment later, slamming uselessly into the ground, scattering dust and debris. Was it telekinesis? It was nothing like space freezing, and definitely not time-stopping. Ash had experienced both before, so he was certain. This was different. The only answer left was telekinesis or maybe something else. So, to sum it up, the monster has unnatural healing. It survives even after its head is severed. It controls vine-like limbs. It has raw physical strength, telekinesis, and its body is certainly poisonous. But is that all? Ash didn't believe for a second that it ended there. A Bloodshroom, he muttered at last, deciding on the name without much thought. His naming sense was never great, and even he knew it. Still, it's not that bad. Anyway, the Bloodshroom turned its countless eyes toward him, each unblinking gaze carrying a suffocating weight, as if trying to peel away the layers of his being. Why do I always end up facing monsters with countless eyes? First the Hollow Mother, and now this Bloodshroom. Cursing his luck, Ash gathered lightning around his legs, letting it fuse with space mana. His figure blurred with speed so extreme it resembled teleportation. In the blink of an eye, he appeared right in front of the Bloodshroom's stomach. Eclipse crackled with violet lightning as he concentrated every spark at its tip, channeling his strength into a single devastating thrust. But his blade stopped, despite the lightning still raging with the same intensity. His sword refused to push forward, and even his body felt locked in place. Ash's mind became sharper, calmer, as it always did when danger rose. Adrenaline surged through him like liquid fire, and with a sudden force of will, he tore himself free, teleporting instantly. He reappeared a short distance away, violet lightning still crackling wildly around him. Without hesitation, he charged once again, aiming to pierce the monster's body. Yet, just like before, his blade was halted before it could even touch. If it has this power, then why did it not use it before? Ash thought, and the answer was not that hard to see. There was no need to use Omni-Thought or Lightning Reflex to speed up his mind, for the reason was simple. Before, there were no eyes on the monster's body, but now there were. Is its power connected to the eyes? Or is there some other source I have to destroy before I can kill it? As he considered this, the ground around him began to shift. All kinds of rocks and plants, from large stones to mushroom-like trees, floated into the air and twisted unnaturally. Their edges sharpened, ground down until they were as fine as needles, all pointing towards him. Ash chuckled when he saw that. At least think of something unique, dumbass. You are not creative at all. As if insulted by his words, the projectiles launched forward, cutting through the air with terrifying speed. Yet Ash simply teleported away, leaving them to tear through nothing. When he reappeared behind the monster, the projectiles twisted unnaturally, turning 180 degrees in midair, chasing after him again. At the same time, the vines on the monster's back whipped toward him with frightening speed. And just like that, the game of cat and mouse began. Ash flashed from one place to another, his figure flickering between blinding bursts of violet lightning, weaving his lightning step and other movement skills into the fight. But no matter how he moved, either the vines or the projectiles always caught up to him. And whenever he tried to attack the monster itself, his blade and spells were once again stopped in their tracks. The monster evaded, unharmed, as if mocking every attempt. Through it all, Ash remained calm. The fight was proving to be a challenge, and that was exactly what he wanted. Yet it was also clear that they had reached a stalemate. But I doubt the creature can carry on this stunt forever. There is always a limit to mental energy. While I can teleport endlessly as long as it is short-distance teleportation, thanks to my dual core, let us see who is more patient. Time began to slip away. Minutes stretched into an hour as Ash studied the monster with sharp eyes, testing it again and again. While the creature did the same, its countless gazes locked on him as if dissecting every move. Eventually, he noticed the first signs of strain. Some of the floating projectiles wavered, then dropped heavily to the ground. But the ones that remained did not weaken. Instead, they grew even faster, sharper, more relentless. The vines too lashed out with greater intensity, forcing Ash to push himself harder. In the end, he had to use Omni-Thought just to keep up with the increased speed. Even then, no clear pattern revealed itself. Should I use Elemental Sight too? His thoughts wandered for a brief moment. Ever since he overcame the chains of his memories and learned to live in the present, rather than being consumed by the weight of the past or the uncertainties of the future, something inside him had changed. His will had grown sharper, steadier. He had learned to give his all in the present moment, to learn from his mistakes, and never to repeat them again. Because of that shift, the abilities he once could not handle together, Omni-Thought and Elemental Sight, had now become possible, though they overwhelmed him mentally, sometimes to the point where his body demanded instant rest, dragging him into the depths of sleep. He had also used both of them together when he fought with Hollow Mother, but he somehow was able to not fall asleep, and continue to fight despite the strain. But now he had no other choice. The third eye symbol appeared faintly on his forehead, and at once his vision changed. The dull, black and white world around him blossomed into something overwhelming, a field filled with countless shimmering particles. He immediately turned his gaze on the Bloodshroom. The Bloodshroom's form was even more grotesque under this sight. Its entire body was woven from wood and twisted plants, pulsing with an unnatural vitality. Around it, and around the projectiles, there was a thick concentration of pale, transparent, water-like particles that flowed in restless waves. Ash realized this was an energy he had never seen before with his own eyes. It was not attributeless mana. That much was clear. Is it some sort of energy belonging solely to this creature, or is it manifestation of mental energy? Ash did not know, though he leaned towards the latter. And on its blood-like mushroom head, twinkling like ominous stars, the glowing orbs shimmered faintly with an even brighter shade under his sight, as if it was a source? Is it the monster's power core or something? He had finally found a lead. The instant Ash found a lead, he moved. Switching off the elemental sight, Ash decided to focus only on the glowing orbs above the crimson mushroom head. They were faintly glowing with a blue radiance, yet under the vision of elemental sight and omni thought, they shone with a far brighter brilliance, almost blinding. Among them, only about a quarter gleamed with full splendor while the rest appeared dull, as if drained of energy. Ash assumed that these orbs worked like a kind of battery. The more orbs that remained charged, the longer the enemy could keep fighting. If every bit of energy was consumed, then perhaps the creature would weaken to the point of death. At least that was what Ash believed, and only time would reveal how close to the truth his assumption really was. Teleporting high above, Ash swung Eclipse in an attempt to shatter one of the orbs. The moment his strike neared, the entire monster reacted. The attacks and vines that had been moving with high speed suddenly accelerated with terrifying speed, all of them rushing toward him as though determined to tear him apart before he could touch its core. Phase. Ash slipped away in the blink of an eye. Bingo! A grin tugged at his lips. He might have failed to destroy the orb, but the weakness was real, and it was a glaring one. The price, however, was steep. His mana was completely consumed. He had already been teleporting non-stop for nearly an hour, and using phase had drained what little remained in his core. Yet, the very core that had been emptied just moments ago was already brimming with mana once again, overflowing with renewed energy. I don't think I even need a mana breathing technique. My mana regeneration is already this ridiculous. And if a mana breathing technique were added on top of that, Ash could not even begin to imagine how broken his recovery would become. But now, how am I supposed to attack it? His eyes lifted toward the sky, where the projectiles, suspended for a moment, were slowly beginning to aim back toward him. Watching them move with eerie patience, an insidious idea crept into his mind. Right? Let's do that. Activating absolute concealment and transcendent step, Ash bolted from the battlefield. Yeah, he ran away. The bloodshroom froze. It looked around cautiously, its massive body shifting as it moved from one side to another, searching for something that was not there. Growing restless, it lashed out in anger, releasing a storm of projectiles that flew in every direction, tearing apart the surroundings and leaving destruction behind. Yet, even after all that devastation, it did not find anything. It remained still for another half-hour, tense and unsettled, before it finally drifted away, continuing in the direction it had originally been moving. Meanwhile, Ash, who had been watching the monster from an even farther distance through his telescope, remained hidden under absolute concealment. Once he was certain the bloodshroom had lowered its guard, he moved. Appearing near the apex monster, he activated Omni Thought and Elemental Sight, but only for a single split second, and that brief moment was engraved into his memory with perfect clarity. Damn, am I an oracle or what? Why am I always right? Ash thought in silence, his eyes narrowing slightly. The countless eyes scattered across the bloodshroom's body had vanished, and with them, so had the strange energy that radiated from them. Earlier, he had assumed it to be mental energy in its concentrated form, and now it seemed that his assumption had been correct. The monster appeared wide open, vulnerable and defenseless, almost as if it was deliberately inviting him to strike. As if there must be some kind of defensive mechanism hidden to protect those orbs. What I have to do is simple: destroy every single orb before that mechanism can even activate. Ash did not know what kind of defense the monster possessed or what form it would take, but it did not matter. He did not need to know. All he had to do was kill the creature first and then study its body afterward. Should I use my skill creation slot? The thought lingered for a moment, but soon he shook his head. No, let's save it for now. The truth was, countless ideas filled his mind. One was to create an appraisal skill capable of revealing the true name of a rune, but he had decided to wait until he obtained a rune from the neutral continent before attempting that. Another was to create a skill meant purely for gathering information. There was also the idea of trying to develop something like necromancy, or perhaps even a skill that could generate a virtual opponent, where every monster or human he had ever witnessed fighting would take shape as an avatar in battle against him. The pain would be real, the struggle just as fierce, yet the avatar would only exist for him to face. With that skill, Ash believed he could overcome the limits of experience itself and sharpen his mastery of combat to perfection. There were many more ideas as well, too many for him to decide which one to implement first. Because of that, he chose to wait and act according to what the situation demanded. If nothing happened, then he would make his choice on his own. So, Ash waited patiently, following the creature in silence, his steps light and careful as he remained in its shadow. When the perfect moment arrived, when he finally judged it was time to act, he moved. "All right, I am going to try something crazy this time. Don't know if this will work. No, it has to work. It must. There is no chance to try again. I have to succeed in one try." With determination burning alongside his creativity, he made a small cut on his hand and let a droplet of blood fall. Into that crimson spark of life, he poured lightning, life, and space mana all at once. Ash knew that if he ever attempted to fuse 3 types of mana and use them as an explosive, the attempt would collapse instantly. The 3 elements were completely different in nature, and it was almost impossible for them to blend. Even when he had forced 2 elements together, the strain on his body was immense, hidden only because of the rune of life constantly repairing him. But his blood was different. His body had always withstood the flow of mana, no matter which type he used, remaining steady, unshaken, and unbroken. He had long observed this strange fact, and he knew why. It was the rune of stability. So, what if his blood carried some properties of that rune as well? If his blood could act as the medium, then perhaps it could endure the impossible fusion. And if that was true, the rest was easy to guess. His muscles stiffened and his veins trembled as he forced 3 kinds of mana into the drop of blood. The body that had once adapted to the fusion of 2 elements was now being tested again, straining under a burden far heavier. The drop of blood, faintly golden at first, began to glow with an otherworldly brilliance as the 3 different manas rushed within it. "Nice! It's happening!" Ash smiled madly, ignoring the way pain pierced through his being and the deadly poison that seeped into his body. Pain was welcome. Pain kept him awake, chasing away the drowsiness that followed his earlier use of elemental sight with Omni-Thought. People would call him insane. They would ask why Ash was going this far, what he hoped to gain, what benefit was worth such torment. What was there to obtain other than experience from slaughtering monsters? Was Alicia in danger? No. Was there a rune to be claimed? No. Was he facing any imminent threat? No. Did he crave revenge? No. Then why? What reason could justify enduring such pain? What drove him to keep growing stronger? What drove him to keep moving forward? Was it sympathy for those who would perish if the world were destroyed? Was his purpose to save the world? Or was it something else entirely? "I am doing it because I want to." Ash gritted his teeth but kept smiling, because that was the truth. He wanted to do it and no other explanation mattered. And who wouldn't try to become all-powerful in a fantasy world? He sought power not out of duty or some noble purpose, but simply because he desired it. He wanted strength that could protect everything he loved, strength that would not let anything be taken away from him. That was his reason to grow stronger. And in truth, there was another reason as well, one he barely noticed. The strange satisfaction of becoming stronger was turning into an addiction. He pushed more mana into the droplet, again and again, until it floated steadily in the air. The pain, instead of being an obstacle, had become a constant reminder of why he must grow. Over time, he had grown numb to it. His past experiences were more than enough to blunt the edge of suffering. Pain was still there, always present, but he had stopped reacting to it, as if his body and mind had finally accepted it as part of him. Time passed. Half of his core was drained, and only then did he stop. Yet the blood droplet did not collapse. Instead, it remained suspended, its surface glowing, seamlessly fusing the 3 elements within. No, fusing is the wrong word. It has not fused. It only appeared to be fused. In truth, the three elements were being kept apart, unable to touch one another. What held them in balance were faint remnants of the power of runes. But this will do for now. With the glowing droplet hovering before him, Ash reached out, grasped it, and vanished as he teleported away, appearing silently above the blood shrome. He threw his blood drop, which was now almost solid as rock, and as soon as it touched the surface of the mushroom head, a devastating explosion tore through everything. Ray POV. The atmosphere here is quite different. Ray thought as he entered the region where apex monsters dwelled. Giant mushrooms sprouted in twisted shapes across the land, and a dark, poisonous fog drifted constantly through the air. Whenever the fog neared him, it was repelled in silence, scattered by the thin layer of wind aura surrounding his body. Not a trace of it could touch him, and with his newly awakened light affinity, whenever a bit of poison managed to seep into him, it was burned away at once by his light aura. Running swiftly across the blackened ground, Ray searched for any strong presence. He had already killed every creature that dared cross his path, from strange dog-like beasts laced with venom to other mutated predators of savage and alpha rank. His kill count had already reached a staggering 450 savage monsters and 190 alpha monsters. The number was proof of his effort, but it also explained why he was late in reaching this place. It took time to kill them all, and he had also needed proper rest along the way. Whenever he slept, Etheris guarded him, ensuring his safety. Even when enemies tried to ambush him in his sleep, he remained unharmed, often without even realizing the attack had occurred because of his mantle skill. Ash would have reached the center by now. Ray pushed his speed higher. His feelings toward Ash were complicated enough that whenever they were near each other, he had to use null mind just to maintain control. Anger, jealousy, and hate all boiled within him, and he had no interest in facing him directly. He only wanted to get this task over with and return. He had no wish to linger near Ash. "Are you not going to comment on anything now?" he asked Etheris, who remained unusually silent, withholding his voice. Perhaps he was angry that Ray kept using him despite his earlier warnings not to. "Fine, stay angry. I am angry too. Just for a different reason." Deeper and deeper he went, yet no monsters appeared in sight. "Is there no mon?" The words were cut short as a thunderous explosion ripped through the region. The ground quaked, and a violent wave of air struck him even from this distance. In truth, he was not far from the source of the blast. "Damn it, why do explosions always happen whenever I go somewhere with that bastard?" Cursing, Ray steadied himself and immediately rushed toward the direction of the explosion. Meanwhile, at the site of the blast, the entire area was stripped bare. The poisonous fog had vanished, the mushroom-like trees were gone, and even the faint essence of life had been erased. There were no plants and no lingering traces of existence at all. The ground bore deep scars, as though countless bolts of lightning had struck the same spot again and again. Every trace of vitality had been sucked away, and the space itself seemed torn. Within a 1,000-meter stretch, there was nothing. No fog, no vegetation, only emptiness. There was no crater either. Nothing to show the destruction except for the hollow silence left behind. It was as though the explosion had occurred within the creature itself rather than the land. A quiet sigh echoed through the desolate region. Sigh! That was dangerous, Ash muttered as he appeared silently, having teleported at the final moment to avoid being consumed by the blast. From his escape, he had seen clearly how the attack unfolded. The most destructive single-target attack. His drop of blood had not acted as expected. Instead of holding the fusion, it had been absorbed into the monster's body, tearing it apart from the inside and causing the catastrophic explosion. It was the exact opposite of the blood that carried the fused wills and intents of two saints, the same blood the Whisperer had entrusted to him for the battle against the Hollow Mother. The explosion was brutal and effective, a sight both terrifying and spectacular. If he had used another spell such as Spatial Vortex, the impact would never have been as deadly. Some techniques were designed for large-scale carnage, while others excelled when facing a single enemy. Anyway, I learned something new though. I always knew the saying that the body is the weapon, but this time I used it literally. He chuckled lightly, glancing at the devastation around him. There was not even a trace of the bloodshroom creature left. But this method is not practical. I lost the mana core, and I wasn't able to study the creature either. Did I make a mistake? Or was I simply overexcited? Ash scratched his head with mild frustration. Nah, I will just find another monster. What happened, happened. Let it be. He let the thought go. Just as he prepared to move on, his sharp ears caught the sound of someone rushing toward him at incredible speed. Lightning surged under his feet as he accelerated, his blade flashing as he swung it toward the approaching figure. Clash! Eclipse and Etheris struck against each other in a dazzling spark. Ash and Ray's eyes locked as they hovered in the air, neither moving for a breath. Then, using the recoil of the clash, both pushed themselves back. So it was you. I should have known that wherever you are, explosions are bound to follow. Ray said coldly, his voice filled with disdain. Ash tilted his head, lightning dancing faintly along his blade. And I should have known you'd arrive late as always. You do enjoy chasing after me, don't you? Ray's jaw tightened. Chasing? I was cleaning out hundreds of monsters while you wasted mana blowing up one. At least I don't need fireworks just to get the job done. Ash smirked, his tone casual but carrying a sharp edge. Hundreds of weaklings that drained your time, while I was actually battling something worth remembering. A silence settled between them, heavy and uncomfortable, as if the air itself was waiting to see who would speak first. Ray was about to open his mouth, but Ash raised his hand slightly, cutting him off before he could say anything. I don't want to waste my time bickering with you. I am gonna go ahead. But before Ash could even take a single step forward, the ground trembled beneath their feet. The sound grew louder with each passing second, deep and heavy, like a rhythmic drumbeat rolling from their left. Both Ash and Ray turned their heads toward the noise, their expressions shifting almost in unison. Don't tell me. The same thought crossed both their minds at the same time. Ray glanced at Ash, his voice low and rough through gritted teeth. It's your fault. Handle it yourself. After all, I deal with weaklings, right? He did not wait for Ash's answer. Instead, Ray turned and ran without hesitation, his figure quickly pulling away. Ash stared at him in disbelief, his expression almost blank. What the hell? Since when was he this much of a coward? Still, despite his words, Ash made a run as well, his feet following the same path as Ray's. What is so bad about being a coward anyway? Sometimes being a coward is actually the smartest choice. Wait for me! Take me with you! Ash shouted, his voice breaking the tension as he waved Eclipse in the air like a man desperately flagging down help. Shut up! Ray barked back, his voice loud enough to carry even as he kept running without looking over his shoulder. I know you are doing this, fully knowing what it means. Do you have a death wish? If you want to die, then die by yourself. Don't take me with you. His tone was sharp but carried a faint trace of panic beneath the anger. Ash, who had caught up beside him, shouted with a grin that felt completely out of place in the situation. I see then. I will leave these weaklings to you, mate. Kill them all. And yeah, they are called blood shromes. I named them, and their weakness is the glowing orbs on their heads. Good luck. Before Ray could curse at him again, Ash disappeared into thin air, teleporting away with no hesitation. Why am I such a good-hearted person? I even told him the weakness of the monsters. That was the last thought Ash had before vanishing completely, leaving Ray alone in the chaos that followed. Ray's expression twisted into pure fury. Damn that bastard. He is the #1 bastard alive. I swear I will kill him the next time I see him. That bitch. Sigh. You have started to swear too much. You used to be so kind. Shut up. And now you finally choose to speak? Do you think this is the right moment to start lecturing me? Where is your anger now, you useless bastard? Ray's mood grew darker, and his heart felt heavy with frustration. When he looked back, his eyes widened slightly. Charging toward him was a massive horde of monsters. Their numbers almost seemed endless. Hundreds of bloodshromes with their mushroom-like head, poisonous dogs with their twisted movements, and strange plant-like creatures crawling and slithering at frightening speed. The ground shook with their charge, the sound of claws and roots tearing into the earth mixing like thunder. It was a flood of monsters, more than 500 at least, maybe even closer to 700. Handling such a tide alone was not something even the indomitable Mantle could make easy. I need to slowly wear them down. Drag them into a fight where I can control the pace. Fighting them head-on will only get me killed. That was why Ray began leading them toward a place he knew well, a spot where the terrain would favor him. Meanwhile, Ash remained hidden in the distance, watching silently from the shadows while wrapped in absolute concealment. His expression was calm, but his thoughts betrayed his true intent. Although this is such a perfect opportunity to train, the number of monsters is clearly around 600, maybe even 700. I should let Ray clear out first. After all, he is my meat shield anyway. And just like that, another battle began, its scale larger and more chaotic than before. 6th day of exam. How are the exams going on? Vice Principal Elva asked as she strode gracefully into the control room. Her entire body was smeared with dirt and blood, making her look as if she had just returned from battling a swarm of monsters. The staff froze at her sudden arrival, their eyes darting to her battered appearance. The sight alone made them gulp audibly before they hastily bent back to their work, hands moving with double the speed. A woman hurried over to Elva, clutching the progress report of all the teams. As Elva walked further inside, the filth and blood that clung to her slowly dissolved, her body being cleansed with every step as though the stains dared not remain in her presence. Her sharp eyes scanned the papers in a swift motion, flipping through each page. After only a few seconds, she handed them back. Any casualties? Elva asked, her tone calm yet carrying a weight that made the staff member stand straighter. No, not yet. There have been no casualties, since the students are teleported away before receiving fatal wounds. There are quite a few injuries, but nothing life-threatening. Most will recover within a day or two, the woman replied carefully. I see. Elva spoke softly, moving deeper into the room, her steps unhurried yet purposeful. Her gaze swept across the monitors before she commented, Looks like the tracksuits designed by the engineers are functioning splendidly. Yes, ma'am, they are working flawlessly, the woman answered, her voice filled with pride. She herself was one of the senior members of that department, so hearing praise from Elva lit a spark of satisfaction in her chest. It is already the 4th day. Release stronger monsters into the field. The woman faltered at that, her face paling slightly. But ma'am, isn't it too harsh? The students are still not strong enough to face something like that. Elva's stride did not slow. It is fine. The world is changing, and even the academy has started discussing how to alter the way students are trained. Dark times are predicted to come, and when that happens, the children must be ready. We cannot allow them to die easily once they step outside these walls. She stopped briefly, her black eyes locking onto the woman's. The tracksuits are holding up perfectly. There is no need for hesitation. Besides, academy personnel are already stationed on the island, shadowing the students without being seen. So do not worry. Release them. The woman lowered her head. Yes, ma'am. She exhaled slowly, almost in relief, and turned to leave. But before she could take more than a step, Elva's voice called her back. What about those two? The staff member paused, confusion flashing in her eyes before realization struck her. She means those two. We still don't know exactly what they are doing or where they are, she admitted. But we know they are alive. The academy suits they wear have not been destroyed yet. Elva gave a small nod, acknowledging the report, and continued on her way without another word. At last, she entered the heart of the control room, where hundreds of monitors lined the walls. Teams of staff sat before them, keeping constant watch over the students for their safety. Elva's senses spread outward, extending across the entire chamber as she drew in every feat at once, her awareness drinking in the scattered scenes. She had already read the reports, yet she preferred to see it with her own eyes. On screen, countless stories unfolded. Some students were learning harsh lessons of survival in the wild, adapting to hunger, exhaustion, and fear. Others, who had lived sheltered lives, were now being tempered by the rawness of nature. Several had already been eliminated, while a few had completed their objectives. The exams were never about who cleared them first. Too much depended on chance. If a team encountered their rivals early, their showdown would come sooner, giving them an advantage. That was why the true evaluation relied on deeper measures. Teamwork, coordination, strategy, individual contributions, planning, and of course combat strength. All of these would determine the final ranking. Sigh. Because of the dungeon breaks, I missed the beginning of it all. She remembered being pulled away to close dungeons that had erupted near Nexus City, where the academy was based. It had taken days of her time, and because of that, she had been absent from the start of the exam. It was a shame because in truth, she enjoyed watching the first few days. Those were the moments when sheltered children, so used to comfort, were forced to wrestle with the harshness of reality. She liked watching them stumble through eating strange things, bathing in cold streams, enduring dirt, filth, and even the simple awkwardness of relieving themselves. It was amusing, and to her, strangely endearing, to watch them struggle through it all. But the dungeon breaks had stolen that chance from her. Just as she was about to withdraw her senses, something caught her eye on one of the screens. Oh, this should be interesting. Alicia and her opponent. Are they finally facing each other? On the island, the wind was blowing freely, carrying the scent of salt as seabirds glided from one point of the shore to another. On one of the rocky peaks near the coastline, at the highest spot, a group of two stood on watch, scanning the surroundings for any sign of an ambush, while the other two were sleeping. It's already the 5th day. Alicia muttered the words while stifling a yawn. Keeping guard was always cruelest when the mind fought against the pull of sleep at night, which was why they had collectively agreed that two of them would stay awake together, rather than leaving one person alone in the dark. Her stomach gave a low growl, and she rubbed her eyes, trying to blink away the haze of drowsiness. After climbing down from the narrow cliff path, she crouched by the edge of the ocean and splashed cold water across her face. The chill stung her skin and cleared some of the heaviness in her thoughts. A short walk into the trees helped her shake off the last of it. By the time she returned, the campfire was already alive, flames licking the skewered meat above it. The aroma drifted through the clearing as the others sat around, speaking quietly while waiting for it to cook. Catching the sound of her footsteps, Corin turned with an easy smile. The food is almost ready. Come, sit with us. Varric and Alina also glanced her way, nodding with warm smiles of their own. Alicia lowered herself to the ground and looked at each of them in turn. They all seemed healthy, their strength restored, their faces more at ease compared to the first few days. What had once been chaos was now order. Varric had built their shelter, Corin kept their water supply steady, and the monsters that lurked in the sea had become their meals. She had made sure each task was balanced and that no one faltered. Piece by piece, they had begun fitting themselves into the rhythm of the wilderness. For a brief moment, the clearing felt calm, almost peaceful. Only Luthen was missing, who must be looking out for the traces of the opponent team. Just 2 more days. And then, the thought had barely formed when a sharp sound cut through the air, the unmistakable whistle of something hurtling toward them at terrifying speed. Instinct jolted through Alicia. She called for her blade, though even summoning it demanded a few precious seconds. Her voice rang out instantly. Get ready. We are under attack. But the others were already moving. Corin thrust his hand outward, water surging and twisting into a rippling shield, while Varric leapt forward to block the path of the attack. A burning arrow streaked through the sky, the air trembling in its wake as it shot toward Alina. She tried to dodge, but her body was still heavy from sitting still for too long. Crash! Varric intercepted her, his arms covered with jagged stone. The arrow slammed into him and the blast shook the ground. The fiery impact hurled him backward, the rock shattering against his skin as he skidded across the dirt. After the attack landed, only then the shield manifested, and they all become enclosed in the bubble of water. Alicia's heart pounded in her chest, the same unease flashing in everyone's eyes. At this early hour, the forest was usually quiet. Never before had they been attacked here at such height and at such precise timing. How had their enemy managed to strike so suddenly, so accurately? Corrin's voice cracked with disbelief. We're already at this height, so how could an attack come from even higher above? Did the opponent find us, without us knowing? One by one, their gazes lifted skyward. What they saw made their skin grow cold. Far above, hovering with effortless grace, was a figure whose crimson hair shimmered like living fire in the sunlight. Her crimson eyes blazed like twin suns, sharp and merciless. Clad in the black academy tracksuit, her hair tied neatly back, she held her hand forward, still smoldering from the attack. Malicia Ravencroft looked down upon them. Boom! A black sword with green veins running along its length flashed through the air, cleaving the poisonous dogs cleanly in two. Ray's body flickered like an illusion, weaving between the tide of monsters that were entirely fixated on tearing him apart. The moment he became tangible again, dozens of pale vines lashed forward and bound him in place. For an instant it seemed he was caught, but he released a burst of rebound energy from the last attack, shattering the restraint and breaking free. Using Flicker Step and Illusion Step together, Ray Dawson slipped through the horde with impossible fluidity. Every movement was sharp, every strike decisive, as though the Grim Reaper himself was cutting down the living. Why did I even run away in the first place? They are nothing but weaklings. His blade tore through a plant-like monster that was spewing poison from its gaping mouth. The toxic breath filled the air in clouds, yet Ray avoided it effortlessly while exchanging blows with the physical attackers. Each rebound of force pushed him backward, creating distance while amplifying the strength of his next strike. His aura sharpened with every swing, slicing monsters apart as though they were no more than paper. With every creature that fell, his stamina returned as though siphoned from their corpses, and the endurance of his skill restored his aura with each blow it absorbed. He was not even positioning himself for advantage over the terrain, yet still the battlefield bent in his favor. This chaotic ground, where countless monsters pressed from all sides and not a single ally could be seen, was nothing short of perfection for him. Well, it was not your fault. I also sensed something strange about their advance. They carried quite a powerful presence with them, but that presence slowly faded away. That means these monsters were within the zone of the boss monster. After hearing the explosion, they probably rushed toward the sound. Or maybe that Lord Monster gave the order to hunt down any invaders. I was right. It was all because of that coward. Now see, he is nowhere to be found, while I am here fighting these monsters alone. Slash! 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 His sword curved through the air like a comet falling from the heavens, each swing carrying both power and precision in perfect harmony. The strikes created a melody of destruction, the sharp sound of the blade cleaving even the air itself echoing like a deadly symphony. Monsters and plants fell alike, cut apart with merciless grace. Just then, a massive hand crashed against him, sending his body flying through the air. His skill absorbed the impact hungrily, dulling the worst of the force. Ray steadied himself midair, landed firmly on his feet, and turned his gaze toward the attacker. It's Bloodshroom again. He wanted to sigh, but instead a tired helplessness flickered across his face. Now, he finally understood why Ash had caused such a massive explosion earlier. It is actually unkillable. Nothing is unkillable, it is only that you do not have the power to kill it. Yeah, I know. It was just a figure of speech. What I meant was that it heals at an unnatural pace, and it blocks every attack with its telekinesis. Its sheer size makes it slow, but even that weakness is covered by the countless vine-like limbs whipping behind its back. Fighting this thing is nothing but frustration. Ray shifted away from the hulking monster and lunged instead at the alpha and the savage beasts. He knew he needed to clear the smaller threats before confronting the real menace, especially since this Bloodshroom was not even the true boss. The actual master of this zone waded even deeper inside. What is irritating is not just that there are apex monsters like this Bloodshroom, but that there are around 80 of them spread across the battlefield. Yeah, if Ash had stayed and fought, at least these small fries would have been cleared by now. Ray's teeth clenched, his jaw tight with unspoken rage. Let that bastard go to hell. I alone am enough. His fury burned hotter than the battlefield around him, fueling his power and pushing his body beyond its limits. Each swing grew sharper, each movement faster, and the killing intensified as anger carried his momentum forward. Meanwhile, Ash was running even deeper into the poisonous land, and as he moved forward, the topography kept changing. The towering mushroom-like trees grew even larger, their massive forms stretching higher than even the Bloodshrooms he had seen earlier. Looks like all the monsters were in that horde earlier. Ash was heading toward the main region where the Lord Monster dwelled. At first, he had thought of joining Ray and helping him fight, but then he changed his mind. Ray was handling the monsters well enough on his own, and Ash decided it would be better to confront the Lord Monster directly. That way, Ash might face a sense of helplessness while fighting that might push him to grow stronger. Well, in the moment between life and death, the enlightenment gained is quite valuable. That's what I have heard. That enlightenment was exactly what Ash desired to push himself forward in the path of the sword. He ran at incredible speed, leaping from one giant mushroom tree to another, and though it felt like much longer, only a single minute had passed. Sometimes moving on foot is better than just teleporting. There was no need to hurry anyway. For him, this was also a chance to test his body and push its limits even further. The trail left behind by the horde of monsters was easy to follow. The ground was torn apart, the trees were shattered, and wide swathes of the land were destroyed by their advance. As Ash observed his surroundings, he noticed that the deeper he went, the more distorted everything became. The trees grew even larger, the grass stretched unnaturally high, and the rocks seemed swollen with a strange energy. The poison in the air also thickened, its color slowly turning black, clinging to his skin and making his body feel hot and weak. What a damned place! The more he moved his body, the more he felt the poison seeping into his body. Eventually, it became too much, forcing him to rely on teleportation. His speed increased drastically, carrying him through the corrupted land. After several minutes of rapid teleportation, the air around him became foul, thick, and almost tangible, colored pitch black just like the ground. The trees and vegetation had also turned blackish, yet the place was not dark at all. Instead, the mushroom trees and other twisted plants emitted an eerie glow, casting an otherworldly light across the land. It was beautiful in its own unsettling way, a poisonous splendor that revealed the true nature of this corrupted land. Here, the rune of life within Ash began to burn even fiercer, as though its very authority had been provoked. The poison was relentless, yet the rune's power devoured it with a ferocity that almost felt alive. Finally, Ash reached the area where the monster's trail abruptly ended. He looked around carefully, ignoring the burning sensation on his skin and the moments when his organs faltered from the poison's intrusion. Even through all that pain, he kept moving. I feel as if I am an undead. The thought crossed his mind naturally. The atmosphere itself felt lifeless, and with his body continuing to function even when parts of it failed, the comparison almost seemed fitting. Studying the ground, Ash noticed something strange. The monsters had not been moving together at first. Their trails suggested they had been scattered, wandering aimlessly, until something had commanded them to gather and surge forward in a single direction. Looks like I reached the place. Activating absolute concealment, Ash pressed on carefully. Not far ahead, he came across the crushed corpse of a beast, its body mangled beneath the stampede of the horde. It was difficult to even discern how it had died. He moved further and found another corpse, then another and another still. Each step revealed more lifeless monsters until, before long, he stood before a vast sea of dead abominations. The sight froze him in place, making his blood run cold. This was not natural. Such a number of dead monsters, gathered in one place, could never be explained by chance. What the hell happened here? Most of the creatures were blood shromes, while the rest were twisted plant-like beasts he had never seen before. Ash did not dare touch any of them, uncertain of what consequences it might bring. Instead, he decided not to test his luck and simply teleported forward, weaving through broken trees and shattered rocks as he advanced. But even after passing the countless bodies, the eerie silence remained. Ash appeared in a clearing, and what he saw there made him freeze completely. What? His eyes widened, his hands trembled uncontrollably. He instinctively took a step back, his body, his soul, and every part of his being screaming in rejection. Because what lay ahead was something his instincts knew all too well. If he went forward, Ash would face true death. Grasswhisker is holed up in that damn tree for almost 2 days now, Luthen thought, sitting inside a tree himself. The tree was massive, large enough to hide a small room within, and that space had become his lookout post. At first, he had assumed that keeping an eye on the beast all alone in the forest would be troublesome, something that would demand constant vigilance, yet the reality turned out to be the opposite. It was surprisingly easy, for the creature was injured. Grasswhisker had been recovering in its shelter, and that injury bound it to one place, making Luthen's task far less demanding than he had anticipated. Still, he remained cautious, worried that the beast might attempt to sneak away while he was asleep or occupied with his daily routines. He had carefully placed traps around its lair. Those traps were not designed to capture it, but to create enough noise to alert him the moment anything stirred nearby. But it's damn boring. That was the only problem he had to face. Time seemed to drag endlessly, and boredom gnawed at him. To pass the hours, he had taken to carving small figures from wood using his knife. The act, rough and messy at first, had proven entertaining enough to ease his restlessness. And so, Luthen remained in his hidden dwelling inside the tree. From the outside, it appeared perfectly normal, blending with the forest. Yet within was a cramped but livable room built with care and precision. Though narrow and congested, it was the best he could manage while keeping it concealed. The little room even had a small window through which he could keep watch on Grasswhisker, and a discreet door that allowed him to leave immediately if the situation turned dangerous. At that moment he was chewing on some jerky. A wide yawn escaped him as he leaned lazily against the wall, his gaze drifting toward the tree where Grasswhisker rested. But suddenly the silence shattered. A loud crash echoed through the forest, the sound of something heavy collapsing onto the ground. Luthen's drowsiness vanished instantly. His body tensed, his senses sharpened, and his eyes darted toward Grasswhisker. To his surprise, the beast too appeared startled, its head snapping in the direction of the disturbance. Wait, if it is still there, then who made that sound? Could it be another beast? Or, his eyes widened as the realization struck. No ordinary creature would come this close. He had scattered a strong concoction of foul-smelling herbs and plants all around the area, a mixture that repelled weaker beasts effectively. That left only two possibilities. Either a strong beast had appeared, one unaffected by the repellent, or maybe it's the opponent team. Just as that thought crossed his mind, the tree beneath him quivered violently. For a brief moment, he lost his footing, and then the entire trunk began to tilt. His heart dropped. The tree is falling. Shit! He scrambled to his feet and lunged toward the narrow door, shoving it open and hurling himself outside. But the moment he left cover, he knew it was a mistake. Suspended in midair, with nothing to shield him, he was exposed. His instinct screamed danger, and the warning proved right a heartbeat later when an arrow whistled past. Its wooden shaft tipped with steel brushed against his cheek, carving a shallow line of blood. If not for his last-second reaction, if he hadn't tilted his head slightly, that strike would have hit true. He would have been eliminated instantly, his tracksuit security mechanism activating to teleport him away from the exam grounds. His landing was rough but manageable. The drop was painful, yet for an awakened individual like him, the height posed no real threat. He staggered slightly on impact, but pushed through the ache, forcing himself upright as though the pain did not exist. Another arrow came at him almost immediately. This time he reacted faster, drawing his sword and slashing it aside. His stance shifted into one of defense, his eyes sharp, his breathing steady, as he braced himself for the next move. And then he saw her. In front of him, standing with bow in hand, was a girl. The sight of her made his heart skip and beat louder, as if trying to break free from his chest. She had long black hair that framed her delicate features, green eyes that gleamed with focus, and skin that carried a bright and healthy glow. Her face was undeniably cute, almost disarming, but the serious expression she wore added a sharpness that only pulled him in further. For a brief moment, Luthen found himself entranced, so much so that he nearly forgot the ground he had just landed on. She is quite fiery. A cute face and a fierce expression. Such a combination feels unfair. Luthen knew exactly what was happening with him, and even though he did not want to admit it, he knew that he had fallen in love at first sight. She is so damn cute. I just hope she is single. If not, just then, from behind him, a blade covered in mana appeared silently, slicing through the air with murderous intent. Luthen barely managed to duck at the last second, retreating swiftly as the strike grazed past him. His heart skipped a beat as he realized he had been so utterly lost in the eyes of that beautiful archer that he had forgotten about the second presence. It was a boy, his body built with firm muscles, and what caught Luthen's attention most was that he shared the same hair and eye color as the archer. That made him second-guess his earlier thoughts, his mind racing. Wait! Luthen raised both hands, making a timeout gesture as if he were in the middle of a game. Before we fight, let me introduce myself. I am Luthen, and I am such a handsome, dashing, and multi-talented young man that even Miss Alicia trusts me. Also, I am quite talented with my fingers. He said this with a grin, rubbing the back of his head and trying to fix his hair in a way he thought looked charming. He especially emphasized the last part while sneaking a glance at the archer, which only made her expression twist into visible disgust. Ah, no, I am talking about crafting and carving. I am talented in that. Ha 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 ha. Cold sweat rolled down his back as he realized how his words had sounded. What the hell was I blabbering? I would have made such a big mistake just now. Shut up. We are not here to listen to your nonsense. Sis, let's not waste time with this bastard. He is the weakest anyway, only good at other things like crafting and cooking, etc. The boy's voice carried sharp disdain as he looked at Luthen with open contempt. Wait. You both are really brother and sister? Damn, I was also thinking the same thing. No wonder there were so many similarities between you two. Luthen rubbed his chin with a thoughtful look, then suddenly clapped his hands as if he had stumbled upon a brilliant idea. How about this? We don't fight at all. I assume that since you already know about me being the weakest, and about me being skilled in crafting, you must also be aware of the plan. You know, to create a false trail, distract you, and then ambush when you finally let your guard down. He leaned back slightly, lowering his voice as if sharing a secret. And also, I noticed something. There were far too many birds around here. It wasn't strange back at the shore, but this deep in the forest? That gave it away. You all are still too inexperienced. Next time, tell your beastmaster to use something else to keep watch. It was a shame that I only realized all of this after coming here. He let out a small laugh and shook his head. Well, after I saw how strangely those birds were behaving, always circling and keeping an eye on me, I already knew our plan was bound to fail. So I thought, why not simply relax and enjoy myself? At least I assumed that Miss Alicia would notice the same thing I did, though for her it would have been much more difficult to confirm. Luthen spread his arms as if presenting undeniable truth. Now tell me, am I right? No one answered, but their silence said everything. The stiff expressions on their faces, the slight widening of their eyes. All of it was more than enough to confirm his words. I will take that silence as a yes, which also means you must already know that as long as Miss Alicia and the others are defeated, the battle is practically won. So why should we fight among ourselves? Why create a rift among us? For example, you there, buddy, what's your name? The boy frowned, but finally answered, It's Eric. Perfect. So Eric, you would not want to see your magnificent, mesmerizing, utterly cute, divine, gorgeous, and otherworldly beautiful sister to sweat against someone like me, right? So let's not fight. How about we just tell? Swoosh! An arrow sliced through the air, forcing Luthen to react instantly. He cut the arrow in half, though he quickly noticed it had not been shot to harm him. You talk a lot. Oh, a compliment. Nice. Thanks for the compliment. Oh, so beautiful lady. If you would grace me with the humble opportunity to know your name, I would be honored. He gave a small, polite bow, his voice filled with exaggerated courtesy. But the archer only stared at him, her expression strange and unreadable. At last, she turned her gaze toward her brother, who merely shrugged. Hey, your name is Luthen, right? Eric asked, his brows furrowed with a strangely concerned look. Without waiting for an answer, he continued, Are you okay? I mean, are you actually okay in the head? Luthen's eyes twitched, but since this was his potential future brother-in-law, he forced himself to remain calm. Yeah, why not? I am perfectly fine. Though, sadly, even though I don't want to do this, the truth is that I was given a task by Miss Alicia, who trusted me even though I am a stranger to her. And I am a man of my word. How can I simply turn away from the responsibility I took upon myself? It would be shameful. He sighed dramatically, his voice carrying a weight of reluctant duty. So as much as I don't wish to hurt either of you, I must still try to eliminate my opponents. But do not worry, I will not harm you seriously. Luthen smiled widely, though inside his thoughts were far from light. If that devil learns that Miss Alicia failed because of me, who knows what he will do? He might even be watching me right now. I should just put on a convincing show. And then get defeated. What is that? In front of him lay 10 enormous corpses, each almost twice the size of Bloodshorn. Their bodies were mangled and lifeless, yet the remnants of their aura still clung to the air like smoke after a fire. There was no doubt, they were all Lord rank beasts. But wasn't this the hunt assigned to Ash and Rey? Weren't they supposed to be the ones bringing down these lords? Then why were they already lying here, slaughtered so cleanly? Who had killed them? Ash had no answer. Yet strangely, the corpses themselves were not the reason behind the chill crawling down his spine. Something far more dreadful had anchored his attention. Something that overshadowed even the sight of 10 dead lords. Just above their piled remains, a thin fracture shimmered, as if reality itself had been split open. A space crack. At a glance, it might have looked ordinary. After all, Dungeon's break had occurred in this area, and cracks in space were nothing unusual in such circumstances. But the longer Ash stared at it, the clearer it became that this was not normal. No, the dungeon fuses with the world after it breaks. That's why every monster has to be killed one by one, even after a break. And the topography of the area also changes, which is quite hard to revert back. Never before had he witnessed something like this. Cracks could exist to form portals or lead to unknown dungeons, but they always concealed their destinations. What lay beyond was never shown. This one, however, bared its truth openly, as though another world had been connected directly with Ecumia. Beyond the crack, Ash could see a beautiful scenery, with vibrant grass and air, even a beautiful sunlight along with azure sky. It looked quite peaceful. But what leaked out of it made his blood run cold. A will, an aura, a presence so overwhelming that even standing near it made his instincts flare with terror. His skin tingled, his muscles tightened, and his thoughts turned heavy. Whatever lay beyond that rift was not something he could face. Not now, not ever. Even Rey would be crushed in an instant. As a semi-divine monster, Or maybe even divine. A/N. Semi-divine, X rank. Divine God rank. Ash did not dare to move. Even the act of drawing breath felt like it might attract attention even though absolute concealment was active. The pressure bore down on him with unspoken words that rattled inside his chest. Move and die. Breathe and die. Shit 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 shit. What kind of cursed luck is this? The only thing keeping his fear from breaking him completely was the size of the rift. Barely larger than a newborn's head, it was far too small for anything to step through. But that only raised more terrifying questions. How had this tear appeared? What could cause such a crack? And more importantly, how had the existence on the other side killed 10 lords without even passing through? There were no answers, only dread. Then, as he forced himself to think, realization crept into his mind. So the monster horde wasn't ordered to kill us. They were fleeing. The lords must have been slaughtered first. And when the others felt that crushing aura, they lost all sense of reason. They ran in desperation, desperate to escape from this abomination behind the crack. That's what caused the horde. Since Ash had traveled the same path, he knew the truth even more clearly. The distance between this place and the location where Ray had been waiting was too great for the monsters to have heard the sound of his explosion at the start. Which meant the beasts had already been fleeing long before the blast. When the sound finally reached them, it had only added to their panic, pushing the tide in his direction. His chest tightened as he slowly began to retreat, one cautious step at a time, his gaze locked firmly on the crack. He did not allow himself even the smallest sound. Every nerve in his body screamed that this was the greatest threat he had ever faced, and to treat it with anything less than absolute caution would mean death. Only when he had gained enough distance did he dare to use teleportation. In an instant, his body flickered away, reappearing in a safer place. The moment he arrived, he collapsed heavily to the ground, realizing only then that he had been holding his breath the entire time. His lungs burned as he gulped in air. His tracksuit clung to him drenched in cold sweat, and every muscle trembled without pause. Is that what a divine being feels like? He did not know. He did not even want to know. But the question gnawed at his mind. Was the existence behind the crack truly divine or semi-divine? He believed so, because of how utterly powerless he had felt in its presence. Yet another thought lingered. What if it wasn't a divine being, but something else entirely? Perhaps a unique monster that specialized in soul attacks, one that crushed through pressure alone. No, it was definitely at least semi-divine. He remembered the crushing weight of monarchs and saints, the suffocating pressure of Solareth, the terrifying majesty of dragon elders, and the overwhelming presence of human saints. Yet compared to all of that, what he had just sensed now was not the aura of an SSS rank being. It was something far beyond. There was another detail that unsettled him even more. Normally, he could withstand the aura of an SSS rank powerhouse because of his primordial core, but this time, nothing of that sort had happened. His core did not react, his defenses did not rise. It was as if he had been stripped bare before an existence that acknowledged no resistance. His breaths grew heavier, his chest rising and falling as his thoughts wavered and circled endlessly. Now what should I do? After thinking for a long while, Ash finally decided to retreat back to where Ray was. His task here had nothing to do with the presence lurking behind the crack. He only needed to kill the monsters, and that was exactly what he was going to do. The crack and whatever lay beyond it would be left for the human saints and the Whisperer to handle. Damn the Academy, they really sent me here to die. Although he cursed the Academy, deep down he knew this was not their fault. The crack must have formed because the space around the world had grown unstable, and with 50 dungeon breaks happening simultaneously on top of that, it was inevitable that something like this would tear open. But aside from that reason, Ash felt something else gnawing at him. Fear of death. Ever since he had obtained the Rune of Death, he had been completely free from that fear. Yet now, just by sensing the mere presence of this being, that same cold terror returned to him. His heart was pounding furiously, not from courage, but from a deep instinct that whispered of danger. Can kill me, If something could truly kill him, perhaps he might find enlightenment from confronting life and death directly. But he was not reckless enough to throw himself into such madness. As if I'll go now. Enlightenment can go to hell. I'll just practice normally. Ash was not insane enough to chase after death. He was a petty man in many ways. If something did not concern him, then he would stay far away from it. Perhaps that made him a coward too. Everyone becomes a coward before death. There is no shame in it. If danger can be avoided, then it should be avoided. Who would willingly seek death if there is nothing to gain from it? Give me a reason, a true motivation, and then I will fight that thing. But perhaps he should not have thought that. Because sometimes, words spoken even within one's heart have a way of turning into reality. When Ash teleported back into the middle of the battlefield, the sight before him was brutal. The alpha and savage beasts had already been slaughtered, leaving only the apex monsters behind. Specifically, the blood shromes. Looks like he already cleaned up the small fry. Ash glanced at the countless corpses scattered across the ground, then turned his eyes toward Ray, who was locked in battle against the towering blood shromes. He's just leaping around, trying to shatter the orbs on their heads. Though it looks like he's already taken down 3 of them, a surge of competitiveness welled up within Ash, mixing with a sharp sting of anger. He was angry at how powerless he had felt in the face of that presence, and now he needed something to unleash that frustration on. These monsters were perfect for that. Tightening his grip on Eclipse, Ash charged forward with everything he had, and like a blazing comet, he crashed into one of the apex beasts. Boom! So she is our opponent. Alicia thought as her gaze locked onto Melissia, who floated high above in the sky. Her heart was beating wildly, yet her mind remained steady. Ever since her 2 personalities had found balance within her, she carried a strange calmness, a sense of clarity that rarely wavered even in the midst of danger. Just then, Melissia's lips moved faintly, almost as if she were whispering a chant, and in the next instant hundreds of magic circles flared to life in the heavens, covering the sky in their radiant glow. From each of them, fireballs materialized, burning fiercely as they rained down toward the ground. Varric! Alicia's voice cut through the chaos. Responding instantly, Varric layered a dome of earth above the shimmering water shield. Boom! Boom! Crash! Crash! Each fireball smashed against their defenses, sending violent tremors through the dome. Cracks ran along the shield beneath, threatening to shatter at any moment. But both Corrin and Varric continued pouring their mana into it, sweat dripping as they barely held the onslaught at bay. Their thoughts tangled amidst the pressure. Why is she so strong? Even Alicia, who stood at the front, could feel the frightening weight behind every strike. It was as though Melissia was holding back, deliberately restraining the power of her spells just enough so the shields could barely endure them. That was the most terrifying part. If she was truly holding back, then what will happen if she unleashed her real power? Did Melissia rank up or something? Alicia did not know. She had once called Melissia a friend, but lately there was an invisible distance between them, like a rift that widened no matter how much she tried to ignore it. She did not understand why Melissia had changed, or why she behaved this way now. But none of that mattered anymore. Right now she is the enemy. When the storm of fireballs finally ceased, Melissia still hovered in the air, her presence as heavy and suffocating as ever. The surroundings, however, were utterly devastated. The mountain peak had been flattened, reduced to broken debris and scattered stones that rolled down the slopes in restless echoes. Ignoring the destruction, Alicia dashed straight toward Varric. Sensing her, Varric moved at once as well. Not all of their time had been spent hidden away inside rooms and keeping watch. They had worked on coordination, creating strategies for fighting enemies in any place, be it air, water, or ground. They had trained for this. Varric bent low into a solid stance, his arms sheathed in thick stone as he shaped them into a wide platform. His body was built for defense, but the raw strength flowing through him was no less terrifying than his unbreakable walls. Alicia stepped onto his earthen hands, and with a surge of power, Varric hurled her into the air with all the force he could muster. She shot upward like a blazing arrow, her blade gleaming with moonlight mana, soul destructive property coating it in a deadly aura. Melissia, watching her approach, narrowed her eyes. She is too straightforward. And she still has no fighting instincts. Rather than rushing, she should have observed more carefully. Hovering effortlessly in the sky, Melissia flicked her hands as if signaling someone, and the air currents that supported her body vanished. Her figure dropped rapidly, descending like a falling star, due to which Alicia's sword passed above her. For a moment, their eyes locked in midair. Melissia's gaze held mocking disdain, while Alicia's face remained calm and unreadable. In Melissia's mind, the verdict was already made. Alicia had leapt into the sky without even thinking. If she had considered her actions for a single moment, she would have realized that Melissia could not fly on her own. Instead of targeting her, she should have targeted the one who cast that magic. She is just as bad as I remembered. They say Saint Alice took her as a disciple, but it looks like she is learning nothing. Melissia lifted her hand as she plummeted toward Alicia, ready to cast a spell. Yet before she could finish, a sudden mana circle formed in front of Alicia. A slanted platform of water appeared, tilting downward. With perfect timing, Alicia's boots struck its surface, and using it like a springboard, she launched herself back into motion, shifting her direction and closing the gap between them once more. For the first time, Melissia's eyes flickered with surprise. Her gaze slid toward the blue-haired boy in the distance, who stood watching her with a faint mocking smile. She turned back just as Alicia reached her. A dragon of fire erupted from Melissia's spell, rushing forward with its maw wide open. But with one clean stroke, Alicia's moonlit blade cleaved through it, her mana unraveling the flames from within until the dragon dissolved into embers. Melissia's lips curved faintly at the sight. Flames surged around her arms as she caught Alicia's blade with her bare hands, fire burning so intensely it devoured the moonlit mana coating the sword. Alicia's eyes widened in disbelief as the pull dragged her forward. Before she could react, Melissia's flaming fist struck her stomach with brutal force. A searing pain exploded through her body, and blood spilled from her lips. Melissia tried to pull her hand free, but she faltered. Alicia's grip had locked around her forearms, clutching the parts that were not yet burning. Despite the unbearable heat, she refused to release her hold. Abandoning her blade, she pulled back her fist, her mana's sole destructive property now swirling around it instead, and slammed it into Melissia's stomach. The impact made blood trail from the corner of Melissia's lips, and her eyes blazed even brighter, fury and madness igniting within them. Meanwhile, someplace far away, another boy was sitting quietly above a tree, hidden by its branches as he observed everything that was unfolding before him. His sight was not his own, for he was controlling the seabirds in the sky and sharing their eyes to watch the battles below. Luthen, was it? He is quite sensitive and intelligent, and strong too. The boy had brown hair and deep black eyes, though they were closed at the moment. His focus was elsewhere, divided between two places at once. On one side, he watched the clash between Alicia and Melissia, and on the other, he followed the struggle between Luthen and the remaining two opponents. But then his vision caught something that made him pause. Wait, are they going to attack Gwen? Through the eyes of the birds, he saw the boy with blue hair, along with the other one, the one with earth affinity, rushing straight toward the place where Gwen stood. Looks like when Melissia gave her signal, they must have noticed that. Now what should I do? The truth was that he was not that strong. His class was Bird Master, not Beast Master, which meant his control was limited only to flying creatures. In this place, at this moment, that was a heavy disadvantage, and he knew it all too well. His stats were nothing remarkable either, leaving him far weaker compared to others here. There is nothing I can really do besides watch. Oh, right, I can at least warn Gwen in advance. That much, at least, was within his reach, and it was something he could manage with ease. Damn. You are quite strong, brother. Luthen spoke as he ducked under another of Eric's attacks, his body moving with natural ease. In that moment he felt free, truly free. For the first time, he was no longer burdened by the weight of hiding his powers, no longer forced to keep anything in the shadows. The freedom surged within him like a rush of wind. But then a quiet thought brushed against his mind. Why was he revealing his strength now, when he had kept it hidden for so long, even from himself? Look at this, how strong I am. The words echoed inside him as he continued, weaving through the storm of strikes. His feet slid lightly over the ground, dodging arrows and avoiding the sharp arcs of Eric's blade, sometimes deflecting them with casual precision, as though it was a game. Sigh. Who knew I would be showing off my greatness to a girl as beautiful as her? Sigh, what a life. Yet while his thoughts were tangled with amusement, his expression told a different story. A dazzling smile lit up his face, making it seem as if he was not fighting for survival, but playing a lively game with his opponents, enjoying every moment. Zane, let's do that. He is far more powerful than we imagined. Eric shouted, his voice sharp with urgency. At his call, his sister abandoned her bow, summoning a rapier that gleamed in her hand, and she quickly joined the fray. Zane, Zane, Zane. So that's her name. It's nice. It's beautiful just like her. The rhythm of his movements shifted once again. His body grew even lighter, his steps more nimble, and his strikes carried a flowing sharpness, almost as though her name alone had breathed new life into him. The siblings lunged at him relentlessly, their swords and rapier wrapped in mana, every clash ringing with force. But Luthen danced through their attacks, slipping between blades and counters, as if he was gliding through a storm, untouchable. Still, his mind wandered. Amidst the sound of steel and mana crashing, he pictured something else entirely. Luthen and Zane, no. Zane and Luthen, yeah, that feels nice. With a swift kick, he sent Eric stumbling backward, and in the same breath his hand brushed against Zane's, holding it for the briefest heartbeat. Oh damn! I held her hands. That single touch froze him, even if only for an instant. His mind blanked, caught between disbelief and thrill. It was more than enough. Zane's punch struck him across the face, and he was sent flying back, his body crashing hard into the ground. Groaning, he rose quickly, his hand moving to his face. Warm blood was already running down from his nose, staining his fingers red. That hurts. But instead of faltering, the sting sharpened his spirit. He steadied his stance, his smile returning, though this time there was focus in his eyes. He lunged at them once again, his mind finally clear. Maybe I could defeat both of them. Boom! Both Alicia and Melissia crashed to the ground, their bodies tangled as they wrestled at close quarters. Melicia's fists came down again and again, each strike carrying crushing force, while Alicia blocked as best as she could and retaliated with her own blows. Yet there was a clear difference in rank, stats, and even race. Melicia's superior bloodline and heightened stats overwhelmed Alicia completely. Every wound she sustained was instantly healed by the eternal flames coursing through her body, knitting flesh and restoring strength almost as if she had never been hurt at all. The same could not be said for Alicia. The injuries she received piled up one after another, slowing her movements and gradually breaking down her body. Even when Alicia launched soul attacks, Melissia endured them. Her soul, once vulnerable, had become resilient after becoming a half-phoenix. The damage was not enough to break her, but each attack still shook her from the inside, leaving faint cracks of pain that lingered. That was not all. When her bloodline awakened, Melissia had skipped an entire rank, leaping directly past adept and into the realm of expert. The gap this created was like an unscalable wall in front of Alicia, each exchange making it clearer how impossible the fight truly was. In short, Alicia was destined to lose. The only question left was how long she could endure, and how much power Melissia was truly willing to use. With a sudden burst of strength, Alicia kicked Melissia away, forcing a small distance between them. Coincidentally, her blade lay on the ground beside her. Without hesitation, she bent down and gripped it tightly, her hands trembling but unwilling to let go. Her body was battered and broken, blood trickling from her lips and staining her torn clothes. She raised her head and looked at Melissia, who stood tall in front of her. Aside from a few smears of dirt and blood, Melissia looked perfectly fine, her expression calm, almost bored, as if the battle was merely an inconvenience. Alicia's eyes darkened with grim resolve, yet just as despair began to settle in, a faint warmth spread through her body. Her wounds, though not fully healed, began to mend little by little, enough to dull the pain and restore some strength to her limbs. Startled, she glanced to the side and noticed Alina hiding within the tall grass, her hands glowing faintly as she poured light energy into her. Alicia's relief was short-lived, for she immediately saw how pale Alina's face had become. Her breaths were shallow, her body trembling as she tried to sustain the spell. Alicia instantly understood. Alina was already near her limit. Her healing was not strong enough to restore everything, but it was enough to stabilize the bruises and patch the internal injuries Alicia had sustained. Melicia's sharp senses immediately caught on. Following Alicia's gaze, she turned her attention toward Alina. So that's it, another one. Instead of running with the other two, she chose to stay here. Her mana perception had sharpened drastically after her bloodline awakening, and her control over mana had become even smoother, making it effortless to adapt to her newfound power. Her eyes glowed faintly, and her aura flared as she decided to stop holding back a little. Up until now she had restrained herself, prolonging the fight deliberately. She wanted to savor every moment, to humiliate Alicia slowly rather than ending it in a single blow. After all, because of her, I had to go through all that embarrassing breakdown. Her thoughts were crystal clear, her emotions sharp and unwavering. This was no moment of hesitation. She simply wanted to crush Alicia, and so she would. She waved her hand and a large magic circle materialized in front of her. Flames burst to life and twisted into a spiraling storm, a raging inferno that roared as it hurtled toward both Alicia and Alina. Alicia saw the blazing vortex racing toward them. Her lips curved into a faint smile, yet it was a smile of helplessness. She could evade it herself, but Alina was too slow to escape. And if she tried to carry her along, her own movements would be hindered, leaving them both caught in the flames. Sorry. Retreat! Her voice cut through the air as she darted back with everything she had. Alina, already weakened, tried to retreat as well, but her movements were sluggish. The fiery tornado consumed her completely, and in the next moment, her body vanished in a shimmer of light, eliminated from the exam. Alicia's eyes flickered as she watched, but she forced herself to remain calm. She isn't dead, only eliminated, and her mana was nearly exhausted anyway. She had already become more of a burden than a help. Her thoughts were cold, stripped of hesitation. Her body blurred, moving at high speed as she launched herself back toward Melissia. Let's do this. She knew she was going to lose. No matter how hard she tried, there was no path she could see that could lead to victory, yet she still resolved to give everything she had. She was going to fight with all she had learned, all she had endured, and every ounce of strength she could muster. It's here. Varric's voice was steady, his tone carrying a heaviness that made Corrin tense as he halted behind him. Both of them stood among the dense trees, their eyes searching through the shadows with unease. Are you sure she's here? Corrin asked cautiously, his voice low, though the question itself felt like a plea. Varric only nodded, his expression unreadable. But where? Before Corrin could even finish, the air split with a sharp whistle. Something cut through with blinding speed. Corrin reacted too late, his reflexes dulled by his reliance on magic. But before the attack could reach him, Varric moved. His arms hardened, stone wrapping around his skin, and he stood like a wall. The attack struck with a shriek, grinding against the stone before dispersing into nothing. A blade of wind, condensed from pure mana, dissolved the instant its work was done. Then came more. From every direction, blades of air sliced toward them. Corrin steadied himself this time. With a sweep of his hand, a translucent shield of water materialized, shimmering faintly as countless droplets spun outward, shooting like bullets to intercept the blades. Swish, swish. Yet just as quickly, more wind blades cut through, mirroring his counter as if mocking him. Varric remained firm, intercepting where the shield faltered, while Corrin shifted to offense, summoning ice that lanced forward in sharp bursts. Each spell consumed more of his mana, but he pressed on without hesitation. The clash of elements continued, water against wind, stone against cutting gales. The forest rang with the ceaseless storm of battle, but after a while, the air stilled. Silence fell. The echo of another fight, Alicia and Melicia's clash, reached them faintly through the trees, carrying the sound of distant destruction. "Show yourself. Stop hiding like a coward," Corrin called out, his voice breaking the silence. A voice answered, drifting back to them as if the air itself whispered from every side. It was impossible to find its source, for it came from everywhere at once. "Why should I? How could you expect such a delicate young lady like me to simply appear before two boys in the middle of a lonely forest?" The playful cruelty in her tone was enough for Varric and Corrin to understand the kind of person they were dealing with. Twisted, mocking, dangerous. They exchanged no words and simply acted. Both exploded into motion, rushing in opposite directions, forcing their unseen foe to react. The sudden move caught Gwen off guard, making her hesitate for the first time. She tried to attack, but her speed was not what it had been earlier. Before, with her wind, she had been fast enough to circle them in an instant, striking from every angle. But now she could not match that pace as the distance between them increased. If she attacked one, other one will be left all alone and free. So she turned her focus toward the weaker one in her eyes. Corrin. Her form blurred, her body moving like a rushing gust, circling to strike. Yet the moment she closed in, jagged earth spikes burst from the ground, forming a barrier around him. Corrin seized the opening, unleashing a storm of water bullets that pelted her relentlessly. Several struck her arms, and though the wounds were shallow, her skin reddened from the force. Was that weak? No. I need to hit harder. I need to make it count. And so he did. His attacks grew heavier, sharper, carrying more weight. Gwen darted and twisted, her speed allowing her to evade most strikes, but not all. Varric held the line as a wall of stone, unshakable, while Corrin flowed with adaptability, his water shaping itself to each new turn of battle. It was like watching three forces locked in balance: unyielding stone, flowing water, and fleeting wind. None of them able to completely overpower the other. The struggle held them in a fragile equilibrium. That balance stretched on for minutes, each second pulling tighter, until the very air shuddered. Suddenly, Corrin's spells evaporated mid-flight, water hissing into steam. The air itself burned, and stone began to melt into glowing cracks. Their heads snapped toward the source, and the sight that greeted them froze their hearts. A storm of fire surged forward, devouring everything in its path. Somewhere in the middle of the ocean, a lone island stood, and in the middle of the forest on that island, the symphony of swords was ringing again and again. Clash! 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 Luthen moved like a phantom, his body weaving between a sword and a rapier as if he were performing a dance. Every step he took resembled the rhythm of a divine melody, his movements flowing so smoothly that even the ringing of steel seemed to follow his pace. He tilted his head slightly, dodging the rapier that flew dangerously close to his face, while his blade turned aside another strike in the same breath. Maybe I showed a little too much. The thought circled in his mind as his arms continued to move instinctively. Luthen was far stronger than he allowed anyone to see, and right now he was only showcasing his skills with swordplay and footwork. The truth was that he had built a perfect foundation in both the novice and apprentice ranks, and he could break into adept rank anytime he wanted. And his talent in all kinds of utility and creative work gave him an advantage that few could even imagine. Whenever he practiced butchering, his strength increased. When he carved, his dexterity improved, which in turn enhanced his stamina. By reading, strategizing, or solving problems, his intelligence continued to grow. There were many more examples, but these were the ones that occurred most often in his daily life, and together they created a frightening growth that most people would never notice at a glance. Right now, though, he was waiting patiently, calm, alert, and ready for the slightest mistake from either opponent, because the moment one of them faltered, the fight would end. Sigh. I wanted to just get defeated after some clashes, but... His eyes suddenly met Zane's, and in that instant his heartbeat grew faster, as if something within him had been stirred. He had learned that she belonged to Class 1C, and he knew that to reach her he needed to be evaluated highly enough to move into the same class. That was the only reason he was pushing himself like this. He thought to himself, if he defeated 2 people from Class 1C here, would that not be enough proof to place him in 1C as well? So he waited, and it turned out to be the right decision. In the very next moment, Eric's footing slipped. Luthen did not hesitate for even a breath. He rushed forward, catching Zane's fist with his free hand as it closed in on him, and at the same time his leg lashed out sharply, kicking the blade out of Eric's grip. His own sword followed in a swift motion, flashing toward Eric's neck. Eric's body shimmered before vanishing into light. He was eliminated. Now only Zane remained. Luthen suddenly realized he was still holding her hand. His chest tightened as his heartbeat quickened so violently that it almost hurt, and his face grew hot. Slowly, almost unwillingly, he lifted his eyes toward her. For a fleeting second he expected to see her beautiful face, but instead what filled his vision was the sharp point of her rapier. Clash! He raised his sword in time, steel grinding against steel as sparks scattered between them. Damn! Why is she so angry? The answer came to him almost immediately. He had just eliminated her brother. No wonder her eyes burned with fury. They exchanged strike after strike, each faster than the last. Luthen defended steadily, but his lips began to move, words spilling out that he had no control over, as if his heart itself was speaking. Are you free after the exams are over? Clash! I mean, I know a beautiful place. We could go there together, maybe explore it if you want. Clash! Clash! Of course, it is not as beautiful as you, but I feel like I could. Clash! Meanwhile, in the control room, Elva was watching the fight unfold, her lips twitching in disbelief. Who the hell is that kid? She pulled up his data and skimmed through it. Everything about him was laid out clearly, though there was no mention of a fallen family. It only stated that he came from a normal household and had been an orphan for a few years. What a weirdo! She murmured under her breath. She could see how talented he was, yet it baffled her how someone with his ability ended up in Class 1E. Not to mention the ridiculous stunt he was pulling, flirting with a girl in the middle of a fight. Sigh, boys these days. Still, she was far more interested in something else. Rather than the messy love matters of Luthen, her eyes were fixed on Melicia's power. If I am not wrong, she is fighting almost the same way Ash did when he sparred with Rey. The thought lingered as she continued to watch. Her focus deepened when Melicia suddenly pulled a big move. Alicia dashed toward Melicia, her blade flashing like a silent predator, moving to unleash her sword art. Melicia quickly retreated, dodging while deflecting her strikes. Every wound that opened on her body sealed within seconds, her flames knitting her injuries back together. But then Alicia did something unexpected. She threw her blade away. Is she an idiot? Melicia's brow furrowed as she rushed in with blazing fists, striking at Alicia's acupoints. Yet before her strikes could land properly, Alicia moved even swifter. Her hands lit with water mana, abandoning her usual moon affinity, and she directly clashed with Melicia's flames. For a moment, their strikes overlapped at terrifying speed. Dozens of blows were exchanged within seconds, water and fire colliding in bursts of steam. Yet Melicia's flames grew hotter and more violent, devouring the water until Alicia's hands began to burn. A vicious blow landed on Alicia's face, searing her skin before spreading fire across her body. Blood sprayed like a fountain as her figure was flung backward, sliding along the ground until she came to a halt. Her body lay still for a moment before a faint stir came. Trembling, She pushed herself onto her knees, her arms shaking as she struggled to stand. Her legs nearly gave out, but she leaned against the trunk of a nearby tree and managed to hold herself upright. Her half-closed eyes lifted toward Melissia, who was slowly walking closer. Why is she like this? Alicia's thoughts spun in confusion. It was supposed to be an exam, yet Melissia's actions carried the weight of something personal, as if there was an old rivalry or some deep-rooted grudge between them. Melissia's steps were steady, and with each one, a strange satisfaction welled inside her. It was as though she was pushing past some hidden insecurity she had never known existed. At the same time, guilt stirred faintly in her chest for hurting Alicia so badly. I will heal her with my flames once the exam is over, but this should end here. I do not want Ash to hate me for hurting Alicia too much. Let's finish this. Her flames flickered as she prepared to end the fight. But then, something unusual caught her eye. At some point, without her noticing, a small white snake had appeared on Alicia's shoulder. Its slender body was flawless, its scales shining like polished ivory. With two tiny horns above its eyes, its pupils shimmered faintly with an azure glow. It looked delicate and beautiful, even adorable at a glance. Yet its gaze carried no hint of innocence. The baby snake was staring at Melissia with a hunger that pierced straight through her. What is? Melissia's thought broke off as her body froze. A sudden urge to kneel crushed her pride and burned through her veins. The world around her melted away, and she found herself drifting in a void of endless darkness. She floated without sense of direction, until a pair of eyes, colossal and ancient, opened before her. They glowed in the abyss like stars of death, watching her with suffocating killing intent. WWWW what? Her body trembled violently, her bones shivering as primal terror took root deep inside her. She could not move, her limbs locked as though shackled by fear itself. Go away! She screamed with every shred of will she had left. The sound tore her throat raw, and in that moment, the darkness shattered. Her consciousness snapped back into reality, but the presence of that entity still lingered inside her mind, crawling over her heart like a shadow she could not shake off. She looked at the baby snake again, and for the first time in her life, her eyes reflected raw fear. Then something else stirred. The blood in her veins boiled violently, screaming at her to stop. It commanded her to kneel before the creature, to acknowledge its dominance. I won't. Her will blazed, refusing the command. Flames surged violently around her, roaring like a wild dragon desperate to devour the world. They spread out in all directions, consuming everything: Alicia, the baby snake, the trees, the air, even her own teammates. Corin, Varric, and Gwen were caught in the inferno, their bodies consumed before they could react. In a single instant, everyone was eliminated. Only Melissia remained, standing amidst a sea of roaring fire that swallowed the forest whole. Her strength drained away, her body faltered, and her consciousness slipped into darkness. It was only because Snow, the baby snake, was still too young, its will undeveloped, that things ended this way. Otherwise, the outcome would have been very different. It had been a clash of bloodlines, a battle between the ancient will of a primordial beast and the inherited might of a half-divine beast. And the winner was already clear. Sigh! That totally drained me, Ash thought as he slumped on the ground, his stamina and both of his cores utterly drained. When he raised his head, the scene around him looked nothing less than hell itself. The ground was soaked in greenish blood, its foul stench heavy in the air, while the corpses of monsters were stacked like grotesque mounds. From blood shrooms to poisonous dogs and even those plant-like creatures, none had been spared. Most of the weaker beasts had already fallen to Ray, but the majority of the blood shrooms were cut down by Ash's presence. Ray served as a constant distraction, drawing their attention with reckless precision, while Ash appeared behind the creatures and shattered their orbs with lightning. At times he even threw himself forward as bait, allowing Ray to finish the strike. It had been brutal, but together, through timing and desperation, they had wiped out every monster in this dreadful land. Finally, The task given to us is complete. Now I can get the privilege to skip classes and even choose to learn directly from anyone I want. A small smile touched his face at that thought, but it quickly faded when something else crossed his mind. He turned his head slightly to the side. Not too far away, Ray was also sprawled on the ground, his chest rising and falling as he tried to catch his breath. Beside him, Etheirys was planted into the earth, its blade gleaming faintly under the dim light, standing like a silent guardian. Should I tell him? Ash's gaze lingered as the question echoed in his head. Should he tell Ray about the death of the Lord Beasts, the strange crack that had appeared, and above all, the presence he had felt hidden beyond it? But I don't think he will believe me. As Ash was caught in thought, Ray suddenly sensed his stare. He frowned, his tired voice rough with irritation. What? Ash sighed softly and looked away, refusing to meet his eyes. He is a lost cause. That deliberate silence only seemed to push Ray's temper further. With a deeper frown, he asked again, sharper this time. Just tell me what you want to say. Ash finally turned back to him. His lips parted, hesitation written all over his face, but after a moment he simply muttered, Nothing. I was thinking that we should leave now. Ray raised his eyebrows, confusion flashing across his face. We still have to kill the boss monster in the deeper region. Ash shook his head with a tired certainty. I don't think I will be able to kill it or even stand against it. I would rather let the saints handle what's left. You know, I don't want to die this young. The massacre we've caused here is more than enough to pass the exam and earn the privileges. Though knowing that damned principal, he might still say something like, technically you did not complete the task, so no privilege. If he says that, then damn him and damn this academy. I will just do whatever I want after that. Frustration spilled out with his words, more than he had intended. Noticing the strange look Ray gave him, Ash cleared his throat and continued, What I meant was, I don't think either you or me are in any condition to kill the monster in the center. The clearing fell silent. The stench of blood hung heavy in the air, and the faint crackle of dying sparks from Ash's lightning was the only sound that remained. Both of them sat there, neither speaking further, the weight of unspoken thoughts pressing down on them. And how did you decide that, if you can't kill something, I can? Ray spoke with a mocking edge to his tone, his eyes narrowing as if daring Ash to challenge his words. Ash smiled lightly, a trace of amusement flickering in his expression. Are you saying you can kill the monster in the center? Ash asked in a voice that carried both provocation and curiosity, as if he wanted to peel back the truth hidden inside Ray's confidence. Yeah, I can, Ray answered, his voice steady, not showing even a hint of hesitation. Ash leaned in slightly, his smile stretching wider. Will you make a bet with me then? Wait, don't do that. Aren't you seeing how confident he is? There is definitely something shady about this. Do not make a bet. Yeah, I know, but think about it. Remember what Major said about this artifact that cages the entire arena, that only a legendary rank person can break free. Yet it has not broken until now. That can only mean the monster is either at the peak of Grandmaster rank, or there are many of them together. But didn't you once say there is nothing unkillable? I should at least try, otherwise it would go against your very words. Etheirys went silent after hearing that, but still added one last reminder, a note of caution lingering in his tone. But be careful with what you do. Yeah. I will, Ray replied firmly. Ash's lips curved into a smile, gleeful and sly. Fine, if you say so. You should. Nice, he fell too easily. Ash had originally been thinking of telling him everything, to simply lay the truth bare, but then he changed his mind. There was a high chance Ray would not believe him anyway, and might still go on to check the center regardless. So instead of wasting words, why not add the weight of a bet into the mix? I would make him owe me, and then I could use that to gain something from him. Damn, I cannot seem to decide what I will ask for. Should I demand a powerful defensive artifact from the system shop? Or should I ask for something entirely different? Countless possibilities circled in his thoughts, but before any decision could settle, he stood up and stepped closer to Ray, pulling something from his soul vault. With a sly grin that spoke of both mischief and calculation, he presented him with a saint-rank mana contract he had found inside the dragon's treasury. Ray looked at the glowing parchment with narrowed eyes. "What's that?" he asked suspiciously. "What else? A mana contract?" Ash replied smoothly, smiling like a shady businessman who had just cornered his client. Few hours later, "Is it here?" Ray asked while gazing at the endless stretch of dead monsters scattered before him. The ground was stained in pitch black, the plants and trees twisted into lifeless husks, and even the air itself carried the stench of corruption. The poison here was so potent that he had been forced to abandon his wind aura and instead cloak himself in light aura just to move freely. It burned against his body like a searing white flame, streams of white fumes rising from every inch of his skin, and every breath felt heavier, yet his figure appeared almost ethereal under the glow. The sight was striking, almost majestic, as if he had stepped into the role of some attention-grabbing protagonist carved straight out of legend. "Would you look at that? Isn't he looking exactly like one of those chosen ones who walk straight into destiny? I can almost guess what will happen next. He will march forward, grab the attention of the beast inside, and then be sucked into the crack, only to explore a whole new world waiting beyond. If I were the author, I might have shaped the story that way as well. It is a cliché path, but an easy one. Yet I do not like that kind of development. It drags the plot, consumes too many chapters, and becomes a hassle. Besides, if Ray were to die, I do not know what the system would do. Would it detach itself and find another host? Most likely me. I doubt there is anyone else it would even consider. But I do not want the system. Who knows what restrictions it might bind me with. I would rather die freely than become chained to it." Ash's eyes narrowed slightly as he studied Ray's glowing form. While he himself had absolute concealment and transcendent step to retreat at any moment if things went wrong, Ray had none of that. Instead, he was shining like a beacon in the middle of a corrupted wasteland, practically screaming for danger to notice him. "That is why. Let's give him that." "Here," Ash spoke as he tossed something toward Ray. Ray caught it instantly and studied it carefully. What he held was a strange metallic sphere, its surface engraved with intricate runic symbols that glowed faintly with a deep violet light, each flicker carrying a sense of weight and mystery. "It is my anchor. To be precise, I altered it in such a way that it can be used in reverse, but only if the anchor is made from something that can be broken. It functions through a process similar to backtracking." Ash went on with a long and detailed explanation, his tone calm but filled with the kind of seriousness that made his words stretch like threads one had to follow carefully. He had made total 3 anchors and distributed 2 of them to Alicia and Eric, the little unicorn, while he used the last one right now. "In short, if you destroy that ball, it will teleport you to wherever I am. The only restriction is that the distance cannot be too great. So keep it with you, and I know you will end up using it, unless you want to die." Did he really give me such a long explanation just to say something that simple? Is he a psycho or something? Even so, Ray quietly tucked the orb away. Because of his space affinity, he could sense how much space mana was sealed within the sphere. The amount was immense, more than enough for a proper teleportation, so there was little reason to doubt its function. Though it would be a lie to say he was not nervous. The way Ash had behaved, combined with the unsettling sight of the countless corpses lying around earlier, had left his instincts on edge. At the very least, having a backup retreat plan was reassuring, even if it did not completely still the unease gnawing at his chest. "Where did your courage go? I feel you are going to lose, and very miserably." "Shut up. I am not scared, only nervous. Besides, look at the positive side. If I win this, Ash will have no choice but to answer all my questions without hiding anything. That way I can finally learn everything he has been keeping from me. You should have asked for the runes instead." As if he would hand them over. "Still, this is the first time I am hearing you mention runes. Did you regain more of your memories or something?" "Nothing like that. I just have the feeling they are extremely important. And powerful too." "I will be going then," Ray muttered. his voice firm even though his thoughts remained restless, and he stepped forward into the heavy silence. As he moved farther from Ash, his surroundings remained quiet and ordinary at first glance, but he stayed cautious with each step. He avoided making even the faintest sound, not wanting to risk waking anything that might be sleeping in the unseen dark. Ray's aura of light continued to burn against the oppressive poison saturating the air, making him glow like a beacon that stood out too clearly in the surrounding gloom. No matter how careful he was, he felt painfully exposed, as if every shadow had its eyes on him. Minutes passed, though each one dragged as if stretched thin. After nearly 5 minutes of walking like that, Ray reached an open clearing, and the first sight that met his eyes froze him in place. The ground was littered with corpses. 10 lord beasts, each one a terrifying existence on its own, now lay slain and hollow. Their monstrous bodies were broken and lifeless, the air still heavy with the stench of their decay. Ray's stomach tightened, dread clawing through his chest as his instincts screamed louder than ever. His body reacted before his mind, pulling back every trace of aura, even if it meant letting the poisonous air seep into him. It was better to endure the poison quietly than to draw attention with his light. What in the world is this? His heart pounded violently, each beat striking against his ribs so hard it felt like it might burst out. His breathing grew shallow, his body trembling despite his desperate attempts to steady himself. Run. Turn back right now. No, use that anchor, crush it. Whatever it is, you cannot face it. That thing is a semi-divine beast. You cannot survive against it. Run now. Heeding Ethris's frantic cry, Ray pulled out the anchor Ash had given him. His fingers clenched around the sphere as he prepared to crush it, his body shaking with urgency. But before he could act, his entire body froze. From the edge of his vision, he caught sight of something. A figure, peeking through a narrow crack in space itself. And in that instant, a single thought filled his mind completely. I am going to die. I am going to die. Ray thought as his body froze from the sheer powerlessness he felt in front of that single eye that suddenly appeared through the small crack. It was a red eye glowing faintly, its shape long and sharp like a diamond. It was filled with hunger, and Ray could feel it pressing on him like a predator staring at its prey. Crush it, Ray. You have to retreat. But I can't move my body. It's not responding. Even though he held the anchor given by Ash tightly in his hands, he was unable to use even the slightest strength to crush the ball. His body felt like stone, heavy and unmoving. The glow in that red eye became brighter and brighter, until suddenly a very fast beam shot out from it. The light tore through the crack in space and came rushing towards Ray at terrifying speed. Ray could feel the heat on his skin. The deadly power inside that strike was strong enough to vaporize him completely. But before he could do anything, before the beam could reach him, the anchor Ash had given him suddenly exploded on its own, wrapping around Ray and consuming him in a surge of light, teleporting him away. As soon as Ray vanished, the beam struck the ground with a thunderous impact. It drilled deeper and deeper into the earth, vaporizing everything in its path, leaving only molten traces behind. Finally, it stopped after piercing a certain depth. The beast behind the crack slowly turned its head and gazed toward a certain direction. It was staring at Ash. Ash was watching everything unfold from far away, using the telescope he had long ago taken from the dragon's treasury. For a moment, his eyes met the gaze of the beast. His vision blurred instantly. His head grew heavy, and blood began to flow from the corner of his eyes. The pressure pressed down on him like a mountain. Only when he forced himself to look away did the suffocating weight vanish. That was dangerous, Ash thought, wiping the blood away as he looked at Ray, who was now unconscious and lying cold on the ground in front of him. Without wasting any time, Ash teleported beside him, grabbed him, and teleported far away before supplying life mana into Ray's body to push out the poison. It was a good thing I took measures. Ash had tweaked his ability to create anchors in such a way that he could destroy them whenever he wished, allowing him to summon anyone to whom he had given his anchor. although he had mainly designed it for Alicia so that no matter where she was, he could always summon her back to his side. But turned out that the same ability was instead used to save Ray's life. After the poison was forced out, Ray's body relaxed, and he fell into a deep sleep. "Let's retreat. I don't want to stay here." Ash pulled out a small button-like artifact, blue in color. Both he and Ray had been given one. Its purpose was simple. It sent a signal outside, allowing the Major to cancel the artifact that was caging them inside. Though there was also another button that signaled the mission failure and created a small pathway for both Ray and Ash to retreat. He waited quietly for a moment. Since he had teleported to the very edge of the mist, he could feel the surroundings shifting. The mist began to recede slowly, and the world around him returned. As the mist fully cleared away, 5 figures came into view, approaching quickly. Ash instantly recognized them, the Major and the captains. The moment they saw Ash holding the unconscious Ray, they exploded into action and rushed toward him. "Take him to the infirmary fast. What about you? Are you okay? Are you hurt anywhere?" Major Draven asked in a worried tone. Captain Marvin immediately took Ray from Ash and hurried to the infirmary before Ash could say anything, while the other captains moved forward, ready to escort Ash back as well. But Ash raised his hand and signaled them to stop. "I am fine and Ray is fine too. He is just sleeping, nothing else. But it would be better if you could contact any of the saints immediately, because although all the monsters behind me are dead, there is a crack in the space, and behind that crack is a semi-divine beast." All of their faces turned pale as they looked at Ash with disbelief, dread, and doubt. "Sigh. They do not believe me at all." Shaking his head, he said, "Just send someone with farsight or something, or you could also check with a telescope. Though try to bring a healer with you. Maybe then you will believe me." Saying that, he walked past all of the captains and the Major. He left them frozen there, but stopped as he felt a hand on his shoulder. "Wait, how did you survive if you encountered a semi-divine beast?" Captain Lyra asked, her voice carrying both doubt and curiosity. To which Ash smiled faintly and replied, "Just like I survived after cursing the saints. You just need guts." Lyra's face turned even paler as she remembered that she was talking to a madman. Then he moved away, leaving behind his last string of words. "I will be returning to the academy first, and inform someone strong about it. Stay clear of the center. Though I would suggest you activate the artifact again after you are done satisfying your curiosity." With that, Ash's body shimmered and vanished from their sight. While Ash saw the first demigod in his life, the exam on the other hand had already ended, at least for Alicia's team. After Malicia eliminated Alicia, Corin, Varric, and Gwen, only Zane, Luthen, and the bird boy remained on the island. Soon, even Zane was defeated, leaving only Luthen, the bird boy, and an unconscious Malicia behind. But when Luthen traveled back, he saw no one, only the traces of the fight. He tried to find the others, but the bird boy had already taken the unconscious Malicia and always stayed out of Luthen's radar. In the end, it was Malicia's team that won, because 2 of her teammates were still present, while Alicia's team had only one left. And because of the bird boy's vision and ability, it was impossible for Luthen to catch them. Thus, Malicia's team claimed victory. The audience who witnessed the match and the instructors who observed the fight were a little shocked, both because of Malicia's powers and her strange behavior at the very end, and with powers of Luthen, who came out like a dark horse. Since Snow was not visible to anyone but Malicia, no one else saw the little white snake. Yet even so, it stirred the students deeply. On the other hand, when Ash returned to the academy with the news of a semi-divine beast, it brewed another chaos among the Human Association's upper staff. A few days passed after the exams ended for everyone. Those who were injured gradually regained consciousness. Not many were seriously wounded, but when Malicia finally woke up, she even helped others by healing them with her flames. This caused another stir in the academy. When everyone learned that her flames could both heal and destroy, her value skyrocketed in an instant, even though it had already been high enough before. Her ability to do such a thing also caused quite a stir among the saints. Many of them even went to ask her father whether he had awakened the bloodline himself. It was not a secret that the Ravencroft family was a descendant of the mythical bird phoenix. Although it was not hidden knowledge, it was something that had gradually faded from people's minds with the passing of time. However, if one decided to study history with even a little seriousness, the connection was not difficult to discover, for the traces were clearly written for those willing to look deep enough. Because of this, all the saints already knew the truth. But very soon, it would no longer remain confined to the saints alone. The rest of the world would come to know it as well. By all accord, Malicia should have hidden her ability related to the eternal flames, especially in such a time when demons had become more active than ever. Yet St. Lucas was not concerned about that at this moment. Eternal flames were the true nemesis of demons. Even if the wielder was killed, they could be reborn again and again within those flames. The word eternal itself carried everything one needed to understand about its power. Of course, that did not mean the eternal flames were without weakness. There were indeed a few, but Lucas knew very well that none of them could be found anywhere on Ecumia. One of the weaknesses was the complete destruction of the soul. If the soul was annihilated entirely, even the eternal flames could not grant rebirth. Another weakness was far more elusive. A rare material in the universe that could absorb the eternal flames themselves, stripping the wielder of their strength and leaving them powerless. And what was this metal? No one truly knew. Even in the legacy books of the Ravencroft family, the only mention was a vague one, speaking of a nameless or said to be formed once in a million years somewhere in the vastness of the universe. Nothing more was ever recorded. With weaknesses such as these, killing Malicia was practically impossible. She could perhaps be caged or suppressed by someone of much higher strength, especially if they had a domain, but at the very least she no longer needed to live under the fear of death. But because of how powerful the bloodline was, it had always been difficult to conceive children, which was the very reason phoenixes were rare even in the ancient times. While this happened, the results came out swiftly. The results of the exam were nothing surprising to most. Although no one knew what task exactly Ray and Ash had completed, as the Academy had prohibited them from speaking a single word about it, the official ranking was still announced clearly for all to see. 1. Ash Byrne. 2. Ray Dawson. 3. Ethan Nightshade. 4. Malicia Ravencroft. 5. Irvin Earthrend. 6. Naira Vaylor. 7. Kale Stormbringer. 8. Alicia Moonglow. And like that, the exams were finally over, and vacation began. The first snow of the season had begun to fall, delicate flakes drifting from the gray sky and vanishing the moment they touched the cobblestone path. A gentle chill lingered in the air, brushing against the skin like a quiet reminder that winter had at last arrived. Below, the small town nestled in the mountains seemed to exist at its own pace, almost frozen in time. Its narrow streets moved with a slower rhythm than the world beyond, where life flowed softly and without rush. In these high regions, however, the seasons always came early, and winter had already begun to lay its quiet claim. Snow has started to fall, Ash thought as he walked slowly, dressed in a long black coat that reached almost to his knees. A plain hat shielded his head from the light snow that was beginning to fall, while a pair of gloves rested in his hands. He carried a grocery basket, filled neatly with bread and vegetables, the faint smell of freshness rising from it as he moved along the cobblestone pathway. All around him, people dressed in winter clothes passed by, their steps steady as they carried on with their everyday tasks and activities. Though the streets were not empty, there was still a certain sparseness in the air. It's almost been 15 days, Ash thought quietly as he turned around the corner and continued to walk. 15 days had passed since the vacations began, and in those days many things had happened. The first of them was that Ash and Alicia had bought a house far from the larger cities and human settlements, hidden quietly in a town that was neither famous nor well-known. The town was called Serenity Falls, named after the waterfall that flowed gracefully down from the mountains nearby. The best thing about this town was its location. Nestled deep within the mountains, and surrounded by endless greenery. Soon, however, all of it would be covered in white as the snow thickened and full winter took hold. Snow was falling even now, but it was very light. Ash's reason for choosing such a place was not rooted in strategy, but in a personal wish carried from his previous life, a longing for peace. If he were to be honest, the past 15 days spent there had been among the happiest moments of his life. Yet beyond the quiet happiness, he had not forgotten his goals. Alongside setting up the house, Ash had also been investigating, carefully seeking information about the Hollow Mother and the rune present in the Dwarven continent, while doing everything possible to remain discreet. After the fall of their city, the dwarves had closed their gates to outsiders. To most, it seemed an act of anger or stubbornness, but the higher authorities of the other continents knew there was a far deeper meaning behind their sudden withdrawal, one not meant for the common people to understand. Ash had also traveled to the Dragon continent during those days, where a deceptive peace lingered now. Yet beneath that calm, change had already begun. The ancient dragons who had slept for centuries were slowly awakening, and the news of it had left Ash unsettled. Events that should have taken much longer were happening too fast, and the knowledge he carried from the novel was beginning to lose its worth. The awakening of the dragons meant uncertainty. They could choose sides, and if that happened then perhaps another war for dragons would be inevitable. No one could say for sure, not even Ash. During his travels he had also met the Unicorn Queen and little Eric, who was not so little now, yet Solareth had not returned from his venture to the neutral continent. His location was still unknown, though his survival was certain. The Queen possessed a soul lamp that still burned, a silent sign that his life had not yet ended, which brought him quite a bit of relief as well. He then asked her about Snow. It was the first time he had gone there after the serpent hatched, since he had not found the time earlier, and now that he finally did, he learned many shocking things. Firstly, she had no idea what a primordial serpent was, because according to Solareth, the egg belonged to a divine serpent, not a primordial one. What shocked him even more was what she confessed afterward. She told him that the moment she laid eyes on the baby serpent, she felt an inexplicable urge to bow and kneel before it. The reason for that feeling was unknown, yet because of her overwhelming strength she was able to resist and shake off that call with ease. But she was still shocked nonetheless. After Ash returned, he thought about it for a long time. No one knew about him possessing the runes except perhaps Ray or the World Tree, so it was not something anyone else could guess. But Ash had a suspicion. When I placed the egg into my soul space, I remember its appearance change and countless runic symbols appear across its surface. There is a possibility that the runes within my soul affected the egg, and because of that it evolved from a divine egg into a primordial egg. It was the only explanation that made sense. Looking from this perspective, many other things also became clearer, such as the reason behind Melissia losing control over her powers and being frozen in place because of snow. Speaking of Melissia, Ash could not help but feel angry when he learned how badly Alicia was hurt. He had thought that after helping Melissia overcome her grief and sorrow, even guiding her to awaken her bloodline, she would be able to move forward. Yet instead of gratitude, she had brought pain to Alicia, and that truth made his blood boil. His first instinct was to march straight to her and give her a proper beating, regardless of her being a girl or her father being a saint. He was no longer that powerless boy from the day he first transmigrated. Now he had countless ways to act and even more ways to make others pay for their actions. Though, he never acted on that anger. The reason being, Alicia. She stopped him. She asked him not to do anything, and even though his heart still burned with rage, he let it go, at least in front of her. If not now, then sometime else. Ash was, in truth, a rather petty person. Being his enemy was the same as becoming haunted by a ghost, one that would never leave until it was completely exorcised. And so, Melissia's name, which had once been removed, was written back onto his list of debts to be repaid. Not long ago, Ash had completely wiped out all the shadow rats that infested the empty mine. He had not simply killed them, but destroyed the entire mine itself, leaving nothing behind but cold corpses and ruins. Another matter in these past 15 days was the semi-divine beast. Ash went there daily, not because he chose to, but because he was called, summoned every single day by none other than the Whisperer. There are a lot of things to do. Ash had truly been busy. So busy that he spent most of his time inside his soul space, where the flow of time slowed to a crawl. There he rested, cultivated, and handled all kinds of work that required focus but not his physical presence. After that, he would spend hours training with his sword, from the first light of dawn until it was finally time for breakfast. Once they ate, he took Alicia to the academy training grounds, where she practiced all day under the guidance of Saint Alice, who appeared for a moment and vanished after giving her instructions, while Ash divided his time between the military base and his own investigations into the Hollow Mother. But today, their supplies for breakfast had run out, which was why he had come to the town market to replenish them. As he turned into another empty alley, its corners covered in darkness and shadow, Ash did not hesitate. Instead, he welcomed the silence, embraced the darkness around him, and vanished from the place. Appearing a few mountains away, Ash arrived at the cliff of a solitary peak, where a lone house stood quietly against the backdrop of the sky. Built of wood and other materials, it was a two-story building with everything one could possibly need. In fact, Ash still did not know how the Human Association had arranged it, but somehow the house had been made ready for use in just a single day. It was clear that an awakened must have constructed it, because such speed was impossible for any ordinary worker. Without bothering to open the door, Ash appeared inside. He carefully took off his shoes and walked slowly toward the kitchen. There, he saw Alicia cooking, the warm and inviting smell filling the air. The aroma reminded him of the days when she had cooked for him before, back when they lived together and shared the same bed. Ahem, not that type of sharing bed, Ash thought as he blushed lightly. Even though they had lived so close, even slept side by side, they had never crossed that line. After all, they were still children. I don't want to be a criminal. Of course, no one would ever charge him, and in this world there were no such rules, yet both he and Alicia felt comfortable with waiting. They had agreed it was better to give it a few more years. Moving without a sound, Ash placed the basket of ingredients on the table and hugged Alicia from behind. She was not startled. Instead, she leaned into him gently. It had become normal for her, something she always expected, because no matter where Ash went, whenever he returned he would hold her in the same way. "You are early and you did not use the door again," Alicia said while stirring egg and rice in the pan. The mixture sizzled, filling the kitchen with a delightful aroma. "Doors are boring," Ash muttered as he buried himself in her presence. Her soft hair carried a fragrance that seemed otherworldly, and when strands brushed against his cheek, paired with the warmth of her skin, it brought him such peace that food itself felt unnecessary. Alicia was more than enough. "You know that I can't teleport anywhere like you, right?" Alicia spoke with a touch of annoyance in her tone, though to Ash it only sounded cute. "Now go get changed. The breakfast will be ready soon with the vegetables you brought." Hearing her words, Ash gave her a small peck on the cheek before pulling himself away. In the next instant he teleported directly into his room, changed his clothes quickly, and appeared at the dining table within minutes. From his chair, he quietly watched Alicia continue cooking, the movements of her hands carrying a rhythm that felt like home. As he gazed at her, his thoughts drifted for a moment. "I have to go to the military camp after this. I heard Ray is coming again." Ash didn't know why, but Ray insisted on visiting that place again and again. He himself only went occasionally, not staying all day but often going on alternate days. Ash, however, had no such freedom. His task was unique, and so he had to report there every single day. Before his thoughts could wander any further, the food arrived. "Why am I even here?" Ash thought as he looked at his surroundings. There was no snowfall in this place at all, although the chill in the air still lingered faintly, though not as chilly as the cold of Serenity Falls. After taking the first position in the exam, he had earned the privilege to learn from anyone he wished in the academy. Even though he did not particularly want to, he still chose the principal as his first target. He was a sword master after all. But being a saint, the principal was an incredibly busy man. That was why Ash had been forced to come to this military base, which remained on constant watch, guarding the crack in space that loomed like a death sentence of the world. After all, behind that crack was a semi-divine beast, and no one was powerful enough to defeat one. So, if the beast somehow crossed over, the world would be doomed. Still, no matter how tight the surveillance, many had already lost their lives to carelessness. The beast within the crack, although unable to fully cross over, was still powerful enough that even some weak awakened people could not bear its presence, and its powers were greater than even a saint. Thus, Saint Nicole remained stationed here, never leaving his post, always keeping his gaze locked on the crack in space. When will he even start teaching me? Ash's thoughts drifted as boredom weighed on him. His position here was rather unique. He was summoned daily here because of his anchors, since Ray had already blabbered about their powers to the principal, who thought of using it as a weapon. Saint Nicole took one of his anchors every day and tried to close the space crack, while also trying to make the beast retreat, but he failed every day. It was quite a view to see a saint beaten back every day, even though the actual monster was not even using 1/10 of its powers. And because Ash could only destroy the anchors manually, he was forced to stay here all the time, ready to act when the principal was in danger. As someone with space affinity, Nicole infused the anchor with more space energy, strengthening Ash's anchor until it was capable of teleporting even a saint. After all, Ash alone did not possess enough mana to move a saint, for their very existence carried the weight of an entire world. Still, it was quite shocking to witness such a thing, since it was almost impossible to combine the mana of two different people. Yet a saint managed it with ease. When Ash asked how he had done it, Nicole replied with only a single word: will, which, in turn, made many ideas bloom in his mind. But it was not as if Ash gained nothing in return. Even without direct lessons, he learned plenty simply by being here. Every day he was allowed to witness a saint fighting with his own eyes, and from that he absorbed as much as possible, filling his mind with nothing but swords. His insight deepened, his instincts sharpened, and his experience solidified, until finally, he reached the first stage of weapon mastery. After fighting more than 1,000 monsters and watching a saint battle day after day, reaching the first stage had become inevitable. Since he already had past experience with the sword, his progress came a little faster than he had expected. Now, his foundation was firm, and his body was filled with pure instinct. Even when he had no intention of doing so, his posture remained upright, his body unconsciously standing straight like a sword. Reaching the first stage brought a qualitative change for him. His senses grew sharper, his control over his body became more precise, and in turn, many other aspects of his combat ability began to change. Yet the next stage was where he was stuck. I don't have a sword art. In truth, he did have one, a sword art he had created himself by integrating it with the divine martial arts. But no matter what kind of sword art Ash made or learned, all of them would eventually be seen through by Ray. I know there will be a day when I have to fight Ray and even kill him. The thought came with a heavy certainty. Ash had a gut feeling that one day he would personally end Ray's life. With the way Ray's system worked, and with how much hatred burned in him, it was bound to happen sooner or later. If not for the possibility that the system might abandon Ray and instead attach itself to him, Ash would have already left him to die against the semi-divine beast. If not that, he would have killed Ray himself long ago. Ray's existence was too dangerous, for he could see through any sword art, no matter how carefully crafted, and even copy them as if they were his own. The system, even in the novel, was quite generous to Ray. It gave him runes as though they were candy. Or maybe it was simply feeding him in preparation for butchering me. Ash could not say for certain, but he believed the system was not some benevolent entity. Whatever it was, it had its own purpose, and that purpose clearly had nothing to do with the livelihood of anyone other than Ray. In that sense, it resembled Ash himself. Despite how he was acting heroic nowadays, all of it was nothing more than deception. Who in this world goes around showing their true selves? Ash was a born schemer. In the beginning, his real nature had been suppressed by Dark Ash, leaving him emotionless and governed only by cold logic and reasoning. But now that he was free of that influence, his true cunning surfaced once more. The world would eventually witness the treachery of his snake-like mind. One example was the search for runes among the dwarves. Day after day, he entered their territory, and every time, more of them rose against him in anger. Yet Ash cut them down without hesitation, whether they were men or women, young or old. He left only when he decided it was no longer worth the risk, for another destroyed city might eventually draw too much attention. Mercy had never been part of his choice, and he had no intention of leaving any loose ends behind. Every action he took was calculated, measured, and coldly efficient. Coming back to the matter of sword arts, there were countless techniques he could learn. Hell, he could even study the personal sword art of Saint Nicole himself, the very pinnacle of skill in the human association, but Ash had no interest in following someone else's path. Sword arts were the foundation of a master's entire existence. They were not just techniques, but the very framework of thought, instinct, and precision that shaped a swordsman's body and mind. Ash had deliberately destroyed his previous foundations for both magic and sword. For magic, he had obliterated his entire magic circle, leaving nothing but a blank slate. For the sword, he had dismantled his shaky foundation and rebuilt it meticulously from the ground up, forging a new base that fit his own instincts perfectly. Learning any other sword art now would only complicate his progress and muddle his personal style. Ray was the exception, blessed with both the class and talent to absorb other sword arts and gradually craft an unbeatable sword art. But no one else could match that combination of skill, patience, and innate aptitude. I want something that cannot be copied by Ray and cannot be understood by Ray, and finding something like that seemed impossible, almost laughably so. Though I could make one if I cannot find it, that was why Ash spent most of his time in his soul space nowadays. He learned every sword art he could access, from the weakest to the strongest, observing every detail, every posture, every subtle shift in weight, every instinctive movement. It consumed a massive portion of his time, but as mana could not be used in the soul space, he relied entirely on his will. This reliance only strengthened his will further, shaping it into a force more rigid and enduring than anything he had possessed before. In fact, he was studying these sword arts for a very specific purpose: to observe and experience as many techniques as possible in preparation for creating his own personal sword art. He had conceived a bold idea, one that could yield a unique, entirely original sword art, the first of its kind in the world, something never seen or heard before. It will be interesting. As time-consuming as it would be, he was grateful that time flowed differently within his soul space, giving him the opportunity to refine himself endlessly without interference. Speaking of time, I also need to absorb the rune of time. The conditions for absorbing the rune of time were extraordinarily demanding. To absorb the rune of time, Ash had to act in the antithesis of his own will. In the novel, Ray had once done something cruel, killing innocent people. That act, so entirely against his heroic nature, allowed him to fulfill the condition necessary to absorb the rune, though that led to a long, tragic trauma for him. So, Ash also tried to do something heroic, tried to save dwarves, and even tried to kill monsters for the benefit of humanity, actions that went against his very nature, but he still had not achieved the condition. Maybe the action is different for everyone. Perhaps for each person, the required act was tied to their deepest instinct, the behavior rooted in the core of their being. For Ray, it had been heroic nature. But for Ash, I am a coward, so do I have to risk my life? He had a strong intuition that he was right. He would need to place himself in genuine danger, to prioritize his life at its absolute risk, and face true death, or at the very least, graze the edge of it. Isn't it quite a coincidence that something capable of killing me would appear just when I needed it? Is fate playing with me again? Ash realized that events were already unfolding beyond his control, moving in directions he could only react to, not dictate, and the world itself seemed to be orchestrating the circumstances that would test him to his limits. As Ash was lost in thought, the fight between Saint Nicole and the semi-divine beast was in full swing. The saint, with his lean yet broad frame and golden, blazing eyes, never stood in one place. He moved constantly, his steps precise and fluid, while the attacks of the beast failed to find their mark. The window it had to strike from was small, But St. Nicole's movements had no such restrictions. From the space crack, only a glowing, diamond-shaped eye could be seen, radiating a strange, almost hypnotic energy. The fight appeared simple at first glance, Nicole attempting to reach the crack while the beast attacked. But there was another battle happening, invisible to anyone. The clash of domains. Nicole's domain extended over everything around him, bending space and energy to his will. Yet as it neared the crack, something seemed to repel his domain, as if he had struck something immovable. No matter how much energy and will he poured into his domain, which had the power to devastate an entire city from rock to rock, it was dismissed as if it were the play of a child. And not only that, my attacks are not working at all. No matter what he tried, not a single strike succeeded. His domain bent around the space crack as if a dam had been placed in the middle of a flowing river. The crack acted as a barrier, forcing his energy to part around it. At the end, he even fused with his domain, increasing his power several times over, but even that immense surge did not accomplish anything. Instead, the crack appeared to have widened slightly. Did it really widen? He was not entirely sure, as the enlargement was extremely subtle, detectable only when he moved close. Otherwise, even he might not have sensed it. After fighting for so long, his energy was nearly depleted, and he began a careful, measured retreat. Ash's presence was not required for every retreat, only for emergencies where the situation could turn deadly. As Nicole withdrew, his body slick with sweat and streaked with blood, steam rose from him in the cold air, giving him the appearance of having been freshly cooked. He inhaled deeply, eyes scanning for Ash, who remained lost in thought but still attentive, his omni-thought working like a finely tuned engine. Ash met his gaze, silent, as if asking, "What now?" Nicole let out a long, weary sigh. Even with the crack slightly widening and the pressing urgency of the situation, the grime and exhaustion clinging to his body demanded attention first. A bath would have to come before he could continue any strategic action. Ash saw the principal retreating, so he stood up as well. It was time to leave. His work for today was done, and what happened next was not something he needed to concern himself with. Though I know, somehow I will end up getting entangled in all this. He moved slowly toward the exit on foot. The space around the crack was unstable, and there was a real risk of misteleportation, so using teleportation here was impossible. Ash's anchor was the only thing that worked perfectly, and his transcendent step functioned normally, though the same could not be said for anyone else. Ash's skill had been made directly from the rune of space, while others' abilities were not. That was the difference. He refrained from using teleportation not because he needed to, but because he did not want anyone to realize he could slip away even in destabilized space. Walking on foot was safer and kept him inconspicuous. The entire area had changed considerably since the last time he had seen it. All the monsters that Ash and Ray had killed were cleared, and around the space crack were machines, destructive weapons, and scattered tents. Hundreds of awakened beings were stationed here, their vigilance creating a fortified perimeter. It had become a priority zone in the otherwise untamed forest. But what are the demons doing for space to destabilize this much? Ash did not know, but whatever was happening was definitely different from the novel. Whatever scheme Orin, the son of the Demon King, was executing, Ash was not prepared for it. Dwarves, elves, humans, unicorns. Looking at the pattern, it seemed as if the demons were targeting all the races, or at least attempting to. The demonic heart Ash had found in the 11th continent had deactivated the shield protecting the world. The dwarves were constructing something mysterious. The Unicorn King's daughter had been killed at an early age, and a prophecy of calamity had been told when the stars and moon-blessed people were born in the same era. All the races Ash had encountered were entangled in this vicious cycle in one way or another. How they were connected, he could not say for certain, though he had a vague idea from what the Whisperer had told him. Nothing more. As Ash continued forward, he noticed someone familiar. Ray Dawson. Ray was moving in a different direction, his expression serious and focused, which stirred Ash's curiosity. Where is he going? Normally, Ash would not have cared where Ray went. It was none of his business. But this time, Ray was heading toward a prohibited zone, a place where entry was forbidden. The land had been poisoned during the dungeon break and had not yet recovered. Some areas had been made safe with tube-like structures filtering out the poison, allowing people to walk safely. But even with those, it was still not a safe place, so everyone had to wear gas masks and full bodysuits, almost everyone. Ash was not included in that. The same was true for St. Nicole and Ray, and some others. Ash's 100 poison immunity had not evolved further. Though he felt no pain or burning now, he assumed it would take a far more potent poison to trigger evolution. Putting that aside, Ash followed Ray quietly, activating absolute concealment to move without being detected. When Ray reached an empty area, nothing but scorched, dark land and poisonous air surrounded him. He stopped and scanned the surroundings. Ash swiftly activated his phase spell, as if anticipating Ray's next move. Ray swung his sword in a wide, sweeping arc, cutting everything in the vicinity. The strike extended to the sky above and the ground below, the energy scattering in all directions. The attack passed through Ash's body, draining his one core due to the immense power behind it, but it was worth it. After the strike, Ray lowered his guard slightly. He must have asked Etheris to sense the surroundings as well. Ray pulled out his phone, pacing in small, uneven circles across the scarred, poisoned land. His shoulders were tense, fists clenched tightly at his sides, and his eyes flicked repeatedly toward the dark, twisted ground. His voice was tight, carrying both frustration and urgency. "I want to enter the crack. Can you help me? I am not mad. It is quite important. After entering it, the space will close, and I have a way to survive." Ray's eyes narrowed, scanning the poisoned soil beneath his boots and the shattered trees around him, as if measuring the risk in the twisted landscape. "Yes, I know it's dangerous. I am not blind to what's inside the crack." He ran a hand through his hair, strands falling into his eyes, and muttered under his breath, "I get it. I know you'll think I'm reckless. I know you think I don't understand the risk, but I have no choice. I have to do this now." Another pause, teeth clenched tightly, and he balled his fists before loosening them slowly. "Yes, I know it's unstable. I know the semi-divine beast is there. I know it can anticipate anything I do. I am not ignorant, but waiting will cost more than risking it." Ray rubbed his temple with the back of his hand, eyes closing briefly, his voice dropping to a near whisper, weighted with desperation. "I hear you. I hear every warning. I know you'd scold me if you could see me now, but I have to do it. Please, I need your help." He turned slightly, scanning the horizon where the poisonous mist curled like smoke over the deadened land, before continuing. "Of course, the crack will not lead to the beast itself. It's some sort of space entanglement, where one side leads to here, but if someone from this side enters, it will lead to somewhere else." Ray's hands trembled faintly as he gripped the phone tighter, shoulders hunched, eyes darting toward the dangerous expanse before him. "I can't tell how I know that, but please just help me enter. It's my life. I can decide what I have to do with it." But the other person hung up the phone. He put his phone down finally, breathing shallow and sharp, his movements stiff with frustration. After a long moment, he turned and left the place swiftly, boots crunching against the poisoned earth. Before vanishing from sight, Ash caught him mutter under his breath, voice heavy with exasperation. "What a crazy quest I have gotten." Curious, Ash narrowed his eyes, watching Ray's figure retreating across the scarred, poisoned land. Every movement sharp and deliberate. Entering the crack, space will lead to somewhere else. And a quest. A slow, knowing smile spread across Ash's face as he pieced the fragments together, the corners of his lips twitching with a mix of amusement and anticipation. "Don't tell me." He tilted his head slightly, eyes glinting with curiosity and a spark of excitement, already sensing how this unexpected turn might play into the chaos he thrived in. Crash! Alicia crashed onto the training ground floor, but she stood up instantly, lunging forward with her blade flashing in a strange, flowing rhythm, as if water itself moved in harmony with her strikes. Her movements were seamless, elegant, and continuous, yet every attack was effortlessly deflected or stopped by St. Alice. Alice stood like an unmoving mountain, radiating a quiet, unyielding power that seemed to halt anything thrown her way. Alicia moved with fluid grace, her blade shimmering faintly with moonlit mana, but a clean, forceful kick to her stomach sent her flying once again. You are leaving too many openings, and you haven't even mastered the first form of the sword art. You need to train harder. Rest for a moment, you have been practicing all day. I just came to check on your progress, Alice said, her voice steady and cold, carrying both authority and concern. It was evening, and after Ash had dropped Alicia at the Academy's training grounds, she had been practicing tirelessly. The Academy was quiet, except for the few students who had no other place to go and remained in the dorms. Still lying on the ground, Alicia looked up, chest heaving slightly, and asked softly, "Teacher, am I not talented enough?" Her question lingered in the empty room, carried on the quiet rustle of the evening wind from the window. Alice tilted her head slightly, her thoughts drifting momentarily to Ash, whom she had also once doubted in potential. A self-deprecating smile crossed her face, though she quickly hid it. So opposite. You do have talent, and it is far from small. It's just, you are having trouble controlling your powers. Your moon affinity has not fully bloomed, which places natural limits on you. As for blade art, you are progressing at a remarkable pace. She paused, noticing that Alicia's gaze had drifted, unfocused and distant. Sighing, Alice moved closer and sat beside her. Despite her busy schedule, she had set aside this time for her disciple. Initially, she had taken Alicia under her wing because of Ash, but as she came to know her personally and witnessed the potential she held, she was genuinely glad she had. As a moon-blessed individual, Alicia was destined for power, if not today, then tomorrow. "Are you thinking about your defeat against Malicia?" Alice asked softly. Receiving no response, she continued, "Her bloodline, dormant for centuries, has awakened. That has given her an immense boost in strength. Now that she has returned home, I expect to see phoenixes flying everywhere soon. So if you are going to compare yourself to that, then give it up. Focus on improving yourself, not worrying about others. Work harder, not bitterly." Alicia nodded, but inside, a storm of thoughts raged. Of course, I know Malicia awakened her bloodline, and I even know who helped her when she had stopped Ash from going on one of his anger-fueled streaks. He had told her the truth, and then the puzzle of pieces fit perfectly. She understood why Malicia disliked her so intensely. Love, huh? Surprisingly, Alicia did not feel anger or jealousy. Instead, a hollow emptiness filled her chest. I need to get strong. She could not explain why, but she hated feeling perpetually on the losing end. She wanted to become stronger, strong enough to surpass anyone. She imagined herself rising beyond even a god's reach so that nothing could ever come between her and her love. But strength was not something that could be claimed easily. There were countless stages to overcome, and she was still struggling in the very early ones. After talking with her for a bit, Alice finally left, leaving Alicia alone in the vast training grounds. Though her mind was crowded with thoughts, she deliberately pushed them aside, trying to focus on the moment rather than the whirlwind inside her. The emptiness of the academy around her made each step feel heavier, yet somehow more peaceful, like a quiet lull between storms. She took a long, warm bath, letting the water wash away the exhaustion of the day and the tension of practice. Once ready, she moved toward the familiar meeting spot, where Ash came every day to pick her up. A deep, soft smile spread across her face as a thought reached her mind. Today was the 10th of October, and in just a week, Ash's birthday is coming. A subtle excitement stirred within her chest, a feeling she had not realized could exist so strongly. It would be Ash's first birthday in this world. Yet there was something almost magical about the timing. Although it's the birth date based on this life, she reminded herself that since their bodies had changed, their birthdays should reflect the present. Age would now be measured according to the body's birth, not the remnants of a past life. Though it's strange, I don't know if it's a coincidence or not, but Ash's birthday in both lives is the same. Alicia's own birthday was entirely different. Yet somehow, Ash's aligned perfectly across both lives. The same was true for his name, too. It's too much of a coincidence. She knew that her transmigration and Ash's had not been random. Someone had orchestrated it. As for who it was and what they wanted from Ash and her, it was a mystery. And she also recognized that this world was not a fantasy world, but a world of a novel, though it would be quite a question whether someone created the world after reading the novel or the novel was written about the events based on the world. She knew this was a novel world, not because Ash had told her, but because she had read enough stories to notice the patterns. Even though she had not read this exact story, the signs were obvious. Ash's early behavior of trying to stay away from her, when the demons attacked the academy, then Ash already knew about. He knew where and how to find a cure when she was injured, and the way he seemed to anticipate dangers, all pointed towards the truth that Ash somehow knew about the events of the world. Only an idiot would not notice that. Still, she knew there were limits to her guesses. She did not know the full extent of his powers, where they came from, or the secrets he carried. Those were things only he could reveal in his own time, and she knew he would. Her hands brushed the smooth, rainbow-glowing necklace around her neck, the one Ash had given her. She remembered the way he held it out to her, the faint warmth of his hand, and the silent reassurance in his eyes. And then there was his strange act of disguising himself as unknown. A quiet sigh escaped her lips. She had learned about it from Saint Alice, who had explained Ash's careful, protective behavior whenever Alicia had been hurt or in danger. Can't he find a better name? Despite her playful frustration, she understood. Every act, every strange behavior, every secret he kept was all to protect her, to shield her from dangers she could barely perceive. That knowledge made her determination swell even more. She wanted to grow strong, not merely for herself, but so she would not burden him with her weakness. She was still far from ready, and there were no shortcuts to the growth she desired, yet the fire in her heart refused to waver. That's why I need to give him the best birthday gift. She had many plans for that day. She knew Ash had almost no friends, and she could guarantee there was not a single person who would claim him as theirs. He was like that, he trusted no one. Even when he acted friendly and close to others, she knew it was always a carefully crafted facade. He trusted no one except her, and that trust was perhaps the most precious thing to him. Someone to whom he could reveal everything. A person who was his world, his mother, his friend, his girlfriend, his sadness, his happiness, his life, his death, his breathing, his blinking, his smile, his gaze. And the same was true for her. Yet she knew that the love she felt for Ash paled in comparison to the depth of his feelings for her, which sometimes made her heart ache. No, I will love him more than he will love me in this life. With that vow silently sworn, she walked into the academy garden. There, beneath the soft golden light of the late evening sun, she saw Ash waiting. His posture was calm, yet every line of his body seemed alert, as though he had been expecting her. His gaze met hers, steady and unwavering, filled with a quiet intensity that made her chest tighten with anticipation. Even from a distance, the faintest curl of a smile played at the corners of his lips, and the air between them seemed to hum with the unspoken understanding that had grown over countless shared moments. October 12, 5031. Ravencroft State, Arcanes. Arcanes was one of the most renowned cities on the human continent. It was the gathering place of magicians, the heart of magical advancement, the city blessed with the highest density of mana, and the very place where the great magic tower had been built. The city itself was a marvel of magical engineering, breathtaking to behold. Its structure was carefully designed, with houses placed in harmonious patterns that made the streets pleasing to the eye. Though the houses appeared old-fashioned, lacking the sleekness of modern design, their appearances were deceptive. Behind the white walls and blue rooftops lay technology and enchantments far beyond what most modern cities could dream of. Most of Arcanes' residents were awakened individuals, wealthy merchants, or mages of varying ranks, and the homes were built to accommodate their particular needs. Between these homes stretched pathways of cobblestone, shaded by abundant greenery. Tall trees lined the streets, and the air was clear, infused with a soft ambient glow of mana that naturally radiated from the enormous vein hidden beneath the city. That vein was said to be endless, a gift from the earth itself. At the very center of the city stood its crowning jewel, a towering spire so tall it seemed to pierce the heavens. Its dark blue stone exterior gleamed with power, its surface covered with countless runic arrays and enchantments invisible to ordinary eyes. This was the Magic Tower, a sacred place where the most talented magicians gathered to research, to teach, and to preserve their vast knowledge. Its library alone contained generations of magical research and countless records of discovery. But the tower was not alone. Surrounding its peak were 5 colossal floating islands, each one a fortress in the sky. Waterfalls streamed continuously from their edges, cascading into the vast lake below that encircled the base of the tower. Those islands held the true heart of the Ravencroft family, their ancestral manor, their treasured legacies, and their most guarded relics all resided upon them. The islands were covered in beautiful structures, gardens, and courtyards, their very existence amplifying the city's beauty. The undersides of the islands resembled inverted pyramids carved from the earth itself, though every surface was etched with ancient runes. Their meanings remained a mystery even to the mages of Arcanes, for the Ravencroft family strictly forbade study of the inscriptions. They claimed it was for safety, as tampering with the runes might cause the floating islands to collapse. In truth, the islands and the Great Lake below were not creations of the Ravencroft family. They were remnants of an ancient ruin, a legacy of a forgotten age. It had been their progenitor, the King of the Crimson Skies, the last true phoenix, who had unearthed and awakened the ruin. By seizing control of it, he secured the foundation of their power, and only afterward were the city, the Magic Tower, and the other buildings raised around it. Inside one of the Grand Manor's chambers upon the floating island, a young girl sat quietly by a tall arched window as she gazed at the city below. Her face was flawless, delicate enough to seem sculpted by an artist's hand, and her long red hair, tied neatly behind her, glowed softly under the warm touch of the evening sun. Yet her eyes, deep and restless, carried a hesitation she could not easily put aside. Should I invite them or not? Malicia Ravencroft, the sole heir of Lucan Ravencroft, sat quietly in thought. The Flame Festival was approaching, a grand event held in honor of her family's bloodline resurgence. Yet as she looked out over the city, her mind wavered, unsure whether she should extend an invitation to Ash and Alicia. After she returned and used the holy relic of the Phoenix clan, the Crown of Ember, every single member of her family, whether from the branch family or the main family, awakened their bloodlines. St. Lucan Ravencroft also received a great boost in his strength. He had been born with a rather potent bloodline himself, but even his flames could not compare to those of Malicia. Although everyone in the family awakened their flames, the extent of the power they received depended entirely on the potency of the bloodline they carried. For instance, most of the branch family members, except for a select few, only gained the ability to regenerate from any wound as long as they were still alive. Once dead, it was true death with no hope of rebirth. Only a handful from the branch families, and of course the members of the main family, awakened the true eternal flames, the flames that carried the power of rebirth itself. The main family was small, consisting of only 3 people: Malicia, her mother, and her father. The branch families were around 100 or so, yet among them only 5 awakened the eternal flames. But even if most members of the branch family awakened only fragments of the flames, the fact remained that they now carried the lineage of a mythical beast. Their bodies grew stronger, and even those who had devoted themselves to magic found their physical power increasing. With refined control over fire, their casting became sharper and more destructive. Yet for those who specialized in close combat, the flames were more than just a gift, they were a true boon. Overjoyed with this resurgence of power in their bloodline, St. Lucan decided to hold a grand celebration. A festival was to be arranged across the whole city of Arcanes, with a private gathering prepared within the Ravencroft estate for close friends, family, and important people. Even though many tense and pressing matters demanded attention, a celebration during such times could still ease some of the weight people carried, if only for a while. But will they come? Malicia sat in silence, her fingers lightly brushing the edge of the window frame, as she wondered whether her invitation would even be accepted by Ash and Alicia. Even though she had healed Alicia after venting the frustration that had weighed on her heart, hesitation still lingered whenever she thought of facing Ash, and even more so when she thought of Alicia. But did she regret what she had done? No, she did not. She had been in complete control of herself and knew exactly what she was doing. Malicia closed her eyes, forcing herself to think calmly, and soon her answer came clearly. She would simply do what she wished to do. I will just send them the invitation. If they come, it will be good. If not, that is also fine. Even after knowing that Ash and Alicia now lived together in the same house, away from the noise of crowded cities, she still held onto the hope of seeing him. What she wished for was not complicated. She wanted nothing more than to see Ash, even though he belonged to someone else. For now, there was nothing that could stop her from quietly looking at him, nothing that could stop her from loving him in her own way. And there is also the matter of my engagement with Ethan. Her situation was tangled and difficult. She was engaged to Ethan. At one point she felt something for Ray, and then she fell in love with Ash. If she looked at it honestly, even from an outsider's point of view, it could only seem like she was unfaithful. She herself had thought the same when she had been at her lowest, blaming herself for everything. In the darkness of her depression, she had found countless reasons to degrade herself, and this became one of them. But things changed after she awakened her bloodline, the flames of Nirvana. With them came a new perception, one that allowed her to sense emotions with a clarity that had not been possible before. She could feel the emotions directed at her, and she could see her own feelings with far greater truth than before. It was not the same as Amelia's ability, which let her sense every emotion, whether directed at her or not. Malicia's gift was focused only on emotions tied to her, and on what she herself carried within. This clarity was not simple, for people often struggle to understand even their own hearts. Yet she could now cut through such confusion. When she turned that perception inward, she finally understood. I never loved Ethan. I only liked him because he was someone who had been with me since childhood, like a childhood friend. For Ray, it was different, a strange attraction that I mistook for love. But for Ash, it is different. For Ash, it is truly nothing but love. She could tell. She could feel it. She could live it. Although now I know that Ethan loves me, perhaps to the point of obsession, I still do not want to continue this engagement. She did not know whether her actions were right or wrong, or what consequences they would bring. All she knew was that she was following her heart. She could not force herself into a bond for life with someone she did not love. I can use this ability of mine as my reason against Father. Hopefully, he does not overreact. With a soft sigh, Malicia rose from her seat by the window and walked deeper into the manor. Her steps echoed faintly against the marble floor as she went to ask someone to deliver the invitation to Ash. Clang! 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 A continuous sound of hammering echoed through the small, closed room, each strike ringing with stubborn persistence. The temperature inside was suffocatingly high. The blazing heat radiating from the furnace in the center of the room made the air heavy and thick, almost making it difficult to breathe. Clang! 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 A young teenage boy with a bulky build was striking a molten piece of red metal again and again, trying to shape it into something more refined. Sweat poured down from every part of his body, rolling along the lines of his muscles that gleamed under the heat and the flickering glow of the furnace fire. His brown hair was tied back neatly with a headband, though strands had slipped free and clung to his forehead. His eyes, dark and sharp as obsidian, did not waver from the metal before him. He was Irvin Earthrend, heir of St. Malice. Clang! Clang! I need to talk with the metal. I need to understand its feelings. Irvin's hammer never stopped moving, his arms rising and falling with mechanical rhythm. The floor and the racks along the walls were already filled with countless weapons of his own making, forged during the short span of his vacation. Most of them were of fine quality, already above the standard of what was commonly found in the market, yet that still was not enough. As the heir of the greatest blacksmith family of the continent, he could not afford to be content with above average. Every weapon he made had to bear the weight of his family's name, and anything less than excellence was failure. And now, with dungeon breaks appearing so frequently, the need for weapons has never been greater. Awakened hunters, guilds, mercenaries, and every kind of organization relied on the blacksmith guild for supplies, both new and reforged. Teams of skilled smiths worked tirelessly to meet the demand, yet Irvin had no role among them. Even Saint Melis himself only forged weapons for saints, his friends, or those closest to him. Irvin's own fighting and smithing skills were still far from his father's level, and that truth weighed heavily on him, which was why he pushed himself harder, forcing his body and will to the limit. Clang! Clang! Father said that if I understand how a metal feels and what the earth itself wants to convey, I will become far stronger than I am now. Clang! Clang! Yet he heard nothing. No whispers, no pull, no voice of the earth beneath his hands. Only the deafening silence of failure. But this, I can't feel anything at all. Nor am I hearing anything. He should have at least given me some kind of hint. Frustration flickered across his expression, yet his hammering never slowed. The strikes continued with relentless rhythm, filling the room with the sound of metal against metal. The piece of or before him was no ordinary metal. It was rare and notoriously difficult to shape. To mold it required precise strikes at exact angles, in a specific rhythm, and only by listening to the essence of the metal could one succeed. Yet no matter how he tried, Irvin could not hear it. No whispers, no faint song of the earth, only silence. Even for him, with such a high affinity for metal and earth, this task was proving far more difficult than he expected. Clang! Clang! But I can't give up. I will learn it. I will understand the feelings of the metal and the will of the earth. If not me, then nobody can. He tightened his grip, gritting his teeth as he forced himself to continue. His hammer rose once more, crashing down against the glowing metal with the same stubborn determination, each strike carrying his vow. Clang! 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 While this hammering session was happening on one side, somewhere else far from the crowded cities, situated near a mountainous region, atop a hill in the basement of a small beautiful house, another hammering session was being conducted. Clang! Clang! Another boy with a slender build and well-packed muscles, wearing only simple pants with his upper body bare, was also hammering a piece of glowing metal without pause. His long white hair was tied behind his back, and his piercing blue eyes were solely focused on the steady strikes of his hammer. His body was covered in sweat, and from his skin, faint traces of smoke seemed to rise under the heat of the forge. Though the basement had no windows, the heat and smoke were slowly being vented outside through runic arrays carved into the walls. The basement itself was far larger than the house above, expanded by space magic. The central area was an open training ground that occupied most of the basement, while two smaller chambers in the corners led to the alchemy and blacksmithing sections. The walls and roof were built from thick alloys, strong enough to withstand the blows of a mythical rank warrior. Constructing this underground facility had consumed most of the military credits Ash had earned after clearing the entire military site in the Untamed Forest. The remaining credits had gone into acquiring equipment for the training area, along with tools for blacksmithing and alchemy. Ash had carefully checked the outlet list given to him by the military. It contained almost everything present in the military treasury, except for a few personal possessions kept by the military, such as the Mist of Illusion artifact, etc. Yet even with what he was offered, he found little of real value. After seeing the dragon's treasure hoard with his own eyes, the military's vault felt like nothing more than scraps in comparison. There had been countless skill books he could have chosen as well, but none of them worked for him. He still did not know whether it was because of his trait, the Codex of Creation, or the primordial core that prevented him from absorbing a skill book. And so, while many others would have treasured such rewards, for him they held little meaning. He had chosen instead to take credits, and with them he built his home. Clang! At present, Ash was focused on molding a red-hot piece of metal into the rough shape of a dagger. Clang! The blade was beginning to take form under his steady strikes, little by little. Of course, this was not the same metal that Irvin was using. Ash had never liked the prospect of relying on others. Assuming that the dwarves might not be able to help him forge what he would one day require, especially since their very survival was uncertain, he had resolved to learn blacksmithing on his own. The same determination had also led him toward alchemy. He could have asked for help from human blacksmiths, or even Saint Melis himself, yet Ash being Ash, such dependence was something he disliked deeply. Still, he was not foolish enough to waste the opportunities before him. Using the privileges granted to him, he had persistently sought out academy instructors, pestering them even during vacation whenever he was stuck. Like a ghost, he would appear suddenly with a question, and vanish just as swiftly once he had his answer. It's coming into shape. The heated metal finally resembled a dagger. While it was still glowing faintly, Ash moved his finger toward it and closed his eyes, shifting his focus inward. This was the most important part, the step he wanted to master more than anything else. Enchanting the weapon with runes. What are enchantments? The meaning was already hidden in the name itself, for anything that could enhance the property of an object was called an enchantment. They were, however, notoriously difficult to perform. Sometimes the metal shattered if the process was not carried out correctly. Sometimes the magic circle wavered and collapsed, and at other times the magic ink failed to show potency. This, though, was only true for the common enchantments practiced by most. There also existed ancient enchantments, long lost to time, which were performed through the use of runes. Humans, being ever adaptable, had tried to mimic these enchantments, but what they created was of terrible quality, far worse than the enchantments made through ordinary magic circles. The same held for alchemy, where runes produced only unstable and disappointing results in most hands. The only exception that showed any promise beyond magic circles was the use of runic arrays devised by humans. Still, the weakness did not lie in the runes themselves. The truth was simple. No one possessed the skill or comprehension to bring out their true potential, and so they appeared fragile and incomplete in comparison to other methods. And right now, Ash was attempting to enchant a piece of metal with runes. He had tried countless times and failed just as many. This was already his 45th attempt. Sometimes the metals he used were too weak to withstand the process, and sometimes he failed at producing a proper magic ink for the enchantments. After repeated failures, he began replacing magic ink with his own blood. To his surprise, it worked far better, as if his essence resonated with the very symbols. A small cluster of liquid blood trickled from his finger as he grazed his hand across the heated metal. He used his willpower to suppress the natural healing of his burnt flesh, forcing the blood to remain, and began inscribing the runes with deliberate strokes. His mind was sharpened, focusing on nothing but the rune before him. His hand moved with precision, almost like a calligrapher putting brush to paper, one stroke flowing seamlessly into another. The most difficult problem he encountered was that he did not know what rune to write and what its effect would be. After all, the runes in his soul were ever-changing, never stopping at one symbol. Thus, he focused on his primordial core. After all, it had runes etched on its surface which were clearly visible, and as they only contained one runic symbol of each rune, it became easier for him to remember their shape. He chose the first symbol that ever appeared on his core, the runic symbol that came from the rune of stability, though what its effects were, even he didn't know. He had a lot of things to do, so he never got enough time to comprehend the runes in his soul space. But comprehension needed time. Although time flowed slowly in his soul space, there was a constant reminder of the outside world, which always distracted him, and he wanted to complete the comprehension in one sitting if he was going to do it. Thus, he was waiting for a stable period of time in the outside world. Right now, there was no stability, only chaos. The dungeons were popping out everywhere, and although most were not breaking, the danger loomed above their heads. Just one more stroke. As his finger completed the final curve of the rune, the entire artifact flared with light. The rune glowed brilliantly, alive for a brief instant, before the metal crumbled and disintegrated as though erased from existence. Another failure. Ash wiped the sweat from his forehead and stepped back, his eyes narrowing in thought. Let's try one more time. He reached for another raw piece of metal, placed it carefully into the furnace, and watched it begin to melt. And once again, the rhythmic sound of hammering filled the room.